a refutation of Hidden Colors 2. What's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Podcast, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city. Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Happy Bodega Eve. Just so happy to be here with you guys. Of course, we got to say what's up to the party people in the chat. We got Nicholas Duke. He says, I have to see the segment 1, but let's go. No doubt, no doubt. We got Shotty Mills. Brah. Bodega ladies in the building. We got Penny Matthew. We got Tyler Lott. We got Mr. Green in the building. We got, hopefully not COVID Florida in the house. Just Florida, right? We got Getty 7. We got D New on the check-in. We got my man Apologies in Detroit. We got Byron Wash. We got the most excellent Theophilus in the building. Man, all right. I see this. I like what I'm seeing.
It's all the way live, man. All the way live.
But as always, please, if you haven't yet, like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend that it's him again. If you'd like to support this online ministry, you can via the PayPal link that's pinned on top of the chat. Or if you'd like to be a monthly supporter, you could become a patron. We get all sorts of goodies to help you in your personal Bible study. So, with that being said, I have the honor and privilege to once again partner up with the second half of the EPMD of urban apologetics. That's right. One wrecks, the other destroys. Talking about none other than Mr. True ID, Adam Coleman. What's going on, sir?
Hey, man, I'm good, man. I'm good. I've been waiting for this right here, bro. But to get it live, man, you know what I'm saying? People don't know, Hidden Colors. Actually, I'm going to save that for later. I'm going to save that little nugget for later. It's gonna be
actually. I mean, no. Let's get into it. Like, what is Hidden Colors? Like, give them some background, and why are we addressing this particular documentary, this segment?
Yeah, no doubt. So, Hidden Colors actually is now you can say it's a series of documentaries. I think they're up to part 5 or so, something like that. And so, it was put out by a gentleman by the name Tariq Nasheed. Used to be an author, and then he kind of got into making these documentaries. And the whole idea, the premise is exposing a more Afrocentric or African-aware, if you will, presentation of history. The idea is that they're going back into history and teasing out facts that people don't know about Africans and their impact on history. So that's the whole, Hidden Colors, obviously. The idea is that our history has been hidden. And so this documentary, they're trying to expose that. So with this particular segment entitled Spiritual Warfare, they're taking some pretty hard jabs at religion, Christianity in particular, obviously. And I don't know if it can really be overstated how impactful this series and particularly this segment has been in terms of when it comes to many of the memes, when it comes to a lot of the claims that people make against Christianity. A lot of it really has its inception for many people with this documentary and with this clip that we're about to take a look at. So we're really getting at the heart of how many people entered into the conscious community. And man, I think that kind of sums it up.
No, that was great. I mean, it put the conscious community on the map.
Yeah.
If there was any one thing that we could focus on that really brought it to the forefront to almost it being mainstream, would have to be these series of documentaries. Sure. I remember, when these things came out, when you would go downtown to the little kiosk in the malls, you buy your little medallions and chains, you would find usually crosses and Star of Davids or Muslim symbols. When this came out and when Erykah Badu came out, all of a sudden, all you saw was unks. Yeah. Unks and Eyes of Ra being sold in these same stores. It completely changed the culture.
Yeah. It was a culture.
You know what I mean? It made it sexy. It made it trendy. People really started gravitating towards these things. And the memes and the talking points that a lot of us have to deal with either in person or online has its inception in this particular clip we are addressing.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, this is the grandfather of the billions and billions of memes that you guys can't stand. Comes from here. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it has such a great impact. I know people in my church have referenced this documentary as if this was some kind of like people actually think they've done research by watching this right. documentary.
Yeah, it's definitely was a watershed moment, I think, in Black American cinema, if you will. I mean, I think it really was that impactful, and I think that's to his credit. I mean, you know, we can call it spade a spade. I mean, to his credit, I mean, it was marketed well in terms of mouth to mouth. Word of mouth type of a thing, kind of a masterpiece, sell it out of your trunk type of a mode, but it did really well. You know, it did really well, and obviously with YouTube being what it is. I mean, Lord knows, I don't know how many clips of this documentary or docu-series, if you will, has found its way on YouTube and various different places on the internet. So, I mean, it's definitely a seminal work in that regard.
Right.
And I think actually it's really a testament to, in many ways, I referenced this, fairly recently in regard to the nuns, so to speak, the NONES. You have these folks who are subscribing to pretty much no organized religion, nevertheless, seeking out some form of spirituality to answer questions that really matter, and just trying to make sense of the human experience. And I think that when it comes to the question of who am I, this docuseries really sought to key in on that aspect of people's yearning to know, you know what I mean? And I think that really is a huge draw. And so, one of the things that you'll see throughout the docuseries, particularly I'll highlight it at certain points in this clip, they really kind of play on that. They play on the heartstrings of Africans of the diaspora and Africans, on the continent as well, but they play on the heartstrings, really keying in on that sense of lost identity. And, I think that we can just take note that, I mean, the reality is, and I'll say this last thing I'll say about this, and I know we want to get into it, but from a discipleship standpoint, this is just something to think about when it comes to what discipleship looks like in churches. We ought to be about the business of helping people to see how the biblical worldview answers the most critical questions, that we encounter in the human experience. And if we're asleep at the wheel in doing so, then we'll find ourselves leaving people to the Tariq Nasheeds of the world and all these other gentlemen who are in this video who will provide answers. It's just like, when you have kids, if you don't tell them about sex, they're going to hear about it from the kids at school.
Right.
You know what I mean? You want them to hear about it in a safe environment that's based around truth. And I think we need to, really think about that, as we kind of, see the different things they touch on in this video.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with that being said, sir, I think let's just get into it.
All right, let's go.
Remember, when they attacked Africa, they did not attack Africa physically. They did not attack Africa educationally. They attacked Africa spiritually.
You could stop it right there.
Said when the European first came to Africa.
Actually, rewind that. Play that one more time. One more time.
3 seconds in, y'all already know what kind of night this is going to be. We stop at like 5 seconds in. You already know.
Remember, when they attacked Africa, they did not attack Africa physically. They did not attack Africa educationally. They attacked Africa spiritually.
All right, you can stop right there. Yeah, MJ, Booker T. Coleman in the house. Actually, he goes by Professor Kaba now. So, yeah. All right, so let's get into this. Right, he says, remember, when they attacked Africa, they did not attack Africa physically. They did not attack Africa educationally. They attacked Africa spiritually. I'm going to be very charitable here and say that Professor Kaba is saying this for a rhetorical effect. Right? I don't think he would believe that this is the only things that occurred in Africa. But just in case he does, right? We have here between the 1870s and 1900, Africa faced European imperialist aggression, diplomatic pressures, military invasions, and eventual conquest and colonization. At the same time, African societies put up various forms of resistance against the attempt to colonize their countries and impose foreign domination. By the early 20th century, however, Much of Africa, except Ethiopia and Liberia, have been colonized by European powers. Okay, this is from Iridu Irobor, professor of history in the Department of Africana, Puerto Rican, and Latino Studies, Hunter College, City University of New York. He is an intellectual historian and consultant on development strategy. So yes, there was military aggression in Africa.
Hey, you did good with that name, man. I was lost on how to pronounce that one, man.
I winged it, bro. I winged it.
Yeah, so you did good with that, man. Respect.
But so as you see here clearly, yeah, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of bloodshed that occurred to our African brothers and sisters. So it wasn't just it wasn't a philosophical takeover of the continent. Right. All right, so yeah, bro. I'm sure you want to say something about that.
Oh man, you already know, bro. I came ready, Doc. So just to let people know, like the angle that I'm going to approach it, many of these clips is I want to break down similar to kind of how we did with the Bantu Jabari debate. I want to break down the argumentation and just really spell it out so we can see, just really evaluate the content, because I think a lot of the video relies upon, like I said before, pulling on the heartstrings and kind of like the emotional content. But what I want to do is I want to look at the logical content and break that down and see, does it do the argument stack up? If we take all the heart stuff out of it and just look at the information, does it really stack up? That's going to be my angle throughout our breakdown. All right, so just had to give that little.
So you want to go back to the video, or?
Well, actually, I got a couple slides.
All right, cool.
Yeah. I promise I'm gonna try to rush through these as best as I can, but I got a couple here. I got a couple. So y'all know how I be making words up, man. I got another word for you. I'm trying to think of the one. I made up a fallacy last time, based upon what somebody was doing. So I got another one for y'all right here. All right. So I'm combining two words. So myopia, and I'm getting these from Webster's Dictionary, but myopia is a lack of foresight or discernment or a narrow view of something. All right. When you have a narrow view of something, right? Mythopia, I might be mythopia, I think it is a creating a myth and giving rise to to myths. Basically, that's mythopia, right? So you got myopia and mythopia. I'm combining them into my own word here, right? I'm going to just call it mythopia. All right. When historical facts, periods, etc., are stripped of meaningful context in order to facilitate the mythical retelling of history. I'm calling that mythopia. We'll call this the mythopic fallacy. That's what we're going to call this, right? So that's what you're seeing in just this first statement right here from Booker T. Coleman. I think he says he goes by Kaba now. You know what I'm saying? And you're going to see the same thing throughout this whole clip that we're going to be breaking down. Is you got to watch out for when people strip away important context and like oversimplify certain events or periods of history or whatever in order to facilitate a mythical retelling of history. All right, now here's why I think this is occurring in this particular video. Oh, here's what I think you have going on. All right, so you've got certain myths that I think are upheld, right? Unfortunately, when it comes to these discussions, I probably could have done more, but I'm trying to, we're trying to keep it under 5 hours. So, you got like this anachronistic African unity versus African diversity. We got to deal with that, right? So when he says they attacked us, already we got an oversimplification, right? Because that us, right, is many times, particularly in this video, you'll see it several times, but just with us here in the West, we have an anachronistic, meaning a perspective of African unity that actually doesn't fit, that we're inserting into earlier periods of African history, right? Now, once we get over here in the Americas, we're enslaved and so on and so forth, you have this diversity of different people groups that are really forced to become an us, right? But that wasn't the case prior to the transatlantic slave trade. Matter of fact, I want to read this a portion of this book. This is African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade, all right, by Ann C. Bailey. And I want you to read, I want you to listen to this piece right here. Just a paragraph. I'm just going to read 10 pages to y'all. Not really. Anyway, just check this out. Here's she's talking about different assumptions that get in the way of us understanding why it is that Africans sold other Africans into slavery. Many people have that question. And listen to what she says here. She says, first, there's the assumption that during the era of the slave trade, Africans conceived of themselves as one people in one continent, as opposed to numerous communities, large and small. The fact is that Africa became a continental force only in the modern era. Ironically, before the onset of the transatlantic slave trade in the 15th century and through much of the ensuing centuries, the many regions of Africa, north, south, east, and west, though interconnected by trade, the spread of religion, and constant intercontinental migration, these regions and communities were largely distinct and separate from one another. The Sudanic kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, Songhai, and West Africa, for example, had little or nothing to do with the great stone kingdoms of Zimbabwe and Southern Africa, which thrived from the 13th to the 15th century. Diversity was, and as it is still today, great, and the sheer expanse of the continent allowed for many communities to live in relative isolation from each other, and sometimes even without knowledge of the other's existence. At the same time, African notions of community, even within the same ethnic group, were often complex, as we see in the Anglo-Ewe example in the incident at Atorkor. That's them she references earlier in the book. And also later in this chapter, Ewe's on the coast were not averse to selling Ewe's from the interior. Notions of community often did not extend beyond a group of villages or towns in a particular area. The ties that bound these communities were clan and kinship networks more than language and customs. In other words, kinship networks were a major determinant of social behavior, even including the way people engaged in the institution of slavery. All right. So when somebody like a Booker T. Coleman comes along, Brother Kaba, I'll refer to him that, I don't know the longer title he's going by now, Brother Kaba, when he talks about they attacked us, it's this very flat understanding of history, just like white people and Africans, right? But that's not how Africans saw themselves. Again, this is African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade by Anne C. Bailey. And it's echoed throughout other works as well. I'll be preferring to get this again in a minute. But I think we really need to understand that, you know what I'm saying, is that we have to take a sober and mature perspective when it comes to African history and not just buy into some of these or strip away these facts in order to cater to a more mythical retelling of history. I got a couple more points. Did you want to weigh in there? Or
no, go for it. Keep going.
Okay, cool. Secondly, African agency versus innocence. I'm saying here's another place where people strip away context and replace it with a mythical retelling of history. The fact of it, and I can actually be pretty quick with this one, but the fact of the matter is, it's not true that you have like this clean-cut good guys and bad guys line to be drawn between white Europeans and Africans with respect to how the transatlantic slave trade went down. That's just not history. You know what I'm saying? You're not doing good scholarship if you approach it in such a flat way. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to, I mean, put it this way, all right, just to kind of make it quick, you know, the same way that you had people who were, you know, infiltrating the Nation of Islam, you know, and end up killing Malcolm X, in the same way that you had people on the plantation ratting out runaway slaves. That's why, you know, Harriet Tubman had to carry a shotgun to make sure she wouldn't get exposed. The same way you had those type of persons, you also had Africans selling other Africans into slavery. It's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? In every era, you got good guys and bad guys in all communities. That's just a fact of the matter. And in this case, you know, across communities, right? So if you look at, I would encourage people to check out the a lot of Equiano. Sometimes he would be referred to as Gustavus Vassa. But, you know, when you look at his story and how he talks about how he entered into slavery, you don't see in his story, I'm just using him as an example, but what you don't see in his story is I got captured by a bunch of white people and then, then I ended up in America. No, actually what happens is as a kid, he's playing out and about and he initially gets kidnapped by other Africans and he's sold to different people groups on the continent of Africa. I think at least 2 or 3 different tribes. He gets sold from this tribe to somebody of that tribe and somebody of another tribe. He gets sold around to different tribes a couple times before being sold to Europeans, right? So the thing of it is, you know, there was a vibrant, I don't even want to use that term vibrant because it sounds too positive, but there was a vigorous and ongoing slave trade to which Europeans were latecomers on the West, in Western Africa. Like the slave trade was going on in West Africa long before Europeans showed up. And now when the Europeans did show up, it's very complex. Again, it's not just a they and us, right? What you have is really, you have, African, you might have one particular group of people selling members of another tribe in order to get their men out of the way so that they can then go invade that land and take that land. You had them weakening each other by selling off the men into slavery. You had, an exchange of enslaved persons who were being marched from the interior. That's what it talked about a second ago when I was reading for N.C. Bailey. You have people who were captured from the interior of Africa, marched down to the coast and sold to Europeans for things like rum, salt, different spices, and, things of that nature. That was going on. Right. So again, if we're going to be mature, right? I mean, I understand why people want to paint this a certain way, but if we're going to be mature, then we can't just have this, good, bad white guys, and good black guys type of narrative. The reality is history, as it often is much more complex than that. Now I understand why a video like this, because again, their whole project is to unearth, if you will, the hidden past of African people. So it's really their efforts are rooted in a reclaiming of African dignity, right? And so by stripping away some of these contexts, they feel like they're doing a service to preserving and uplifting African dignity. But the reality is, now, I'm gonna go with the Imago Dei. We have dignity. And the enslaved persons, and actually the people who participate in the slave trade, they all have a level of dignity because we're made in the image of God. So we don't have to falsify historical facts in order to uphold a sense of dignity. If we have to do that, then that's actually a red flag that your sense of dignity is grounded in something that is fickle and non-lasting. You know what I'm saying? So that should be an indicator to you right there. Our dignity ought to be grounded in the image of God. Last thing I'm gonna say too is very interesting is that, and I'll be quick in this. I really would encourage people to get this book, man. Honestly, it's pretty dope. But in this book here, she talks about what's called the Atorkor incident, right? Because he really oversimplified, they attacked us, spiritually. and like you said, if we want to be charitable, then we can assume that he's aware that more than that was taking place. But in the Atorkor incident, you have to make a long story short, you have this chieftain who was engaged in the slave trade with Europeans already, and trading other things as well. And basically, they would march members of the Awe from in the Awe, EWE was a people group in Western Africa, and they would march them from the interior and then sell them to the Europeans. You know what I'm saying? But theoretically, their guys should be safe, right? But unfortunately, what happens is in this particular incident, the chieftain, some of his elect drummers were duped by Europeans into the slave ship and then, carted off to America. And it was like this scandalous thing because up until then, like their people hadn't been, enslaved like that. I'm saying they were just shipping off people from the interior, but all of a sudden, oh snap, like they're coming for us too. And it was like a red flag, like that, like none of us are safe. These people can't be trusted. So I said that to say that it's not true that they only, attacked us spiritually, but you have this, the kidnapping element, of what was going on, deception, if you will. Again, I talked about it earlier when it comes to economics, right? Obviously, you have, unfortunately, African chieftains and so forth trading people for things like spices, rum, so on and so forth. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. If Booker T, Brother Kaba is going to be consistent, and if his notion is that, okay, well, because they attacked us spiritually, then we ought not to engage in Christianity, for example, then in the same way, they also manipulated us economically. That was part of the attack too. So we ought not to engage in economics if we're going to follow his logic. So now we should just all be broken and destitute, right? If we're going to, be in step with his logic. See, this is where argumentation breaks down, right? These are the kind of things that we have to listen out for. It's not enough to just pull on the heartstrings. We really got to look at how these things play out. Is it true? Number one, when somebody is making these sort of claims, and then two, what are the implications? I had a couple more things I wanted to say, but I think I pretty much summed it up, for the most part. I'll probably just leave it at that.
Cool. MJ would like for you to restate what book was that again?
Yeah, it's actually I have two of them here. Africa Remembered. I got Africa Remembered. I haven't even finished this one. You can't see it because it doesn't have a cover on it. But Africa Remembered. I can put the title to it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
This is African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade. One last thing I'm going to make on this point is that when it comes to, I want to shed light on a common type of objection that we see that we ought to know how to respond to, is that when he makes the claim that they attacked us spiritually, Like even if that's true, you want to ask the question, is that a statement about Christianity or is it a statement about Christians? Right? I mean, to say they attacked us spiritually, if you got to be able to make that distinction, right? So it is true that professing Christians did some real dirt in enslaving Africans. There's no doubt about that. There's no way that we should skate around it. People who profess to be Christians did real dirt in enslaving other human beings. Absolutely. That's what Christians did. But that's not a statement about Christianity, right? In order for you to connect the dots between what those Christians did that was clearly objectionable to leverage it as a legitimate critique of Christianity, what the person who's raising this objection has to do is show how what those Christians did is a reflection or outworking of the teachings of Christ or Christianity proper, Orthodox, right? So if they can't do that, then at best all they have is an ad hominem attack, against Christianity. I'm saying you're attacking Christianity on the basis of the character and actions of people who profess Christianity. That's fallacious. I'm saying if you can't tie the dots between Christianity and what these Christians did, then you're just left with a fallacious argument.
Right.
So these things have to be teased out.
Byron says less than 10 seconds in. This is true, but we have to do this, right? Because it's not just catching the body, right? It's decapitating the head and burning the corpse. Like we have to overdo it. We have to overdo it.
We have to.
So with that, can we get back in the video?
Yeah, my bad, man. I don't think the comments will be as long, but like you said, we got to do it though. We got to overdo it. We have to. So overdo it. There is no life in the body. There's no finger moving. Nothing. It got to be dead, gone. Lest there be any confusion when you see
exactly.
When you see Adam Coleman, the BK apologist, we're bringing a gun to a knife fight. That's what we're doing. I'm saying it's as simple as that.
Plasma cannons, lightsabers, like everything.
Right.
It's embarrassing. You know what I mean? It's like we want to make this completely. We want to eviscerate. What we're talking about. All right.
Absolutely. All right. Here we go.
All right. Yada said when the European first came to Africa, the Africans had the land and the white man had the Bible. White man told him to close his eyes, get on his knees and pray. Jomo said when the black man opened his eyes, the white man had the land and the black man had the Bible. We have bought into a story that we told them. They have twisted it. They got it twisted. We have now bought that story back.
All right, real quick. I just got one thing to say on that one. Real quick. Y'all, I mean, I hope y'all are seeing like the oversimplification, man. Like this dude is really wilding, like super wilding. But just real quick, he said that something that is half true. He said that we bought into a story that we told them, and now we bought it back. I'm gonna tell you why that's partially true. I won't even say half. I'll say partially true. The reality is, prior to any of the Western European nations that were involved in the transatlantic slave trade, prior to any of them really even existed, you actually had Africa flourishing. I mean, Christianity flourishing on the continent of Africa for about 5 centuries. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to look at the oldest of, when you think about like Britain, the Danish, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, like those are going to be like your 5 main nations, European nations that were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The oldest of them, depending on how you slice it, is going to be Britain. It's going back to, if you really want to stretch it, go back to the 5th century. And Christianity had already been in Africa for about 5 centuries by then. And during that time, you have a number of Africans, as illustrated in or explained rather in Thomas Oden's work, how Africa shaped the Christian mind. You have Africans who played extremely influential roles in the formation of how we articulate Christian doctrine, philosophical defenses for Christianity, how we understand certain points of orthodoxy and so forth. Like there's African fingerprints all over Christianity before the formation of these Western European nations that exploited our people. So in that sense, you do have Africans playing a role in, quote, the story that we told them. Now, what's funny about that is people talk about, oh, well, you got Christianity from your slave master, from the white man. Okay, well, yeah, but before the white man, first of all, that's not completely true, number one. But number two, before the white man, You say, but got a hold of it. It had already been in Africa anyway, right? So, I mean, cats, I think, are again, oversimplifying history, and in the process, actually doing a disservice to African history, in so much as they're cutting out the African contributions to the Christian movement, if you will. So, yeah. All right. So let me get back to sharing the video. All right.
What we call the African and the communities that person lived in is where the concept of religion comes from. Europe never produced a religion, ever. Asia receives its religion from Africa. All of them. Buddhism, Hinduism, Shinto. As a matter of fact, to be more scholarly, starts with Hinduism. The first Hindu gods to come across were black Africans. And they came across, they were called Sambo, which is now a derogatory term used for blacks, mulattoes, etc. Sambo.
You can stop it there. All right. As an MC, KRS-One, amazing.
Of course.
Classic records, right? But unfortunately, in this segment, he's being very sloppy with his claims, right? Europe never produced a religion era, ever, right? Okay. Throughout the Paleolithic, some Neanderthal societies practiced an early form of totemism or animalism because, quote, they performed rituals related to hunting and believed in a master of animals. Evidence found by multiple archaeologists in several locations across Europe from the Middle Paleolithic caves points to the possibility of a widespread Neanderthal bear cult and therefore animalism. This is from Prehistoric Religion, Regan Gerhardt. They had a religion. All Europe had a religion. They all had one. It was a form of animalism. So for him to say there is no religion in Europe, it's a bold-faced lie. They had one. It's not the one you like. It's not the one I like either. But they had one, right? And then he goes on and he says, matter of fact, to be more scholarly, starts with Hinduism. The first Hindu gods to come across were Black Africa. And they came across, they were actually what would call Sambo, which is now a derogatory term used for blacks and mulattoes. Now, what he's doing is a verbal form of parallel mania, right? We're going to take two words that sound similar. Therefore, there's a direct correlation between these two words, right? And again, it's lazy because the word he actually is talking about, and this is from an introduction to Buddhism, which he should know better because he's a practicing Buddhist himself.
That's what I thought Chris, that he was. Yeah,
Chris is short for Krishna. That's where he gets KRS from. That's where it comes from.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So the actual deity in question here, or the form, is Sambo Gaia. Not Sambo, but because Sambo sounds, the first part of the word sounds just like Sambo, they must be the same.
Right.
Sloppy, very sloppy. It's a subtle body of limitless form. Buddhists such as, I'm not even going to try to say their names, as well as advanced bodhisattvas, such as, I'm not going to say their names either, can appear in a enjoyment body. A Buddha can appear in an enjoyment body to teach bodhisattvas through visionary experiences. It's some sort of form called Sambo Gaia. It's not Sambo.
Right.
It's not. But let's look at the etymology of the actual word Sambo. This is from African and Native Americans, The Language of Race and the Evolution of Red Black Peoples by Jack D. Forbes. Sambo come into English language from Zambo, the Spanish word in Latin America for a person of mixed African and Native American descent. All right. Mm-hmm. In Webster's Third New International Dictionary, it says here, it holds that it may have come from the Congo word Nzambu, meaning monkey. Spanish term, patazambo, both of which translates to bow-legged, right. This is from the Spanish English Dictionary, Cambridge University. Oh, and that's it. So That's where the word comes from. It doesn't come from Hinduism. Again, this is a verbal form of parallelomania. Just because two words sound similar in English, by the way, does not make a direct one-to-one correlation.
That's wild. But you know what? You're right, man. And they do that all the time. I want to say there's at least one or two more times that happens in this video. But I think it's like imagine like I'm wearing glasses, right? And one lens is hyper skepticism, okay? And the other lens is a hypersensitivity to, for Black dignity. I'll just put it that way. I think that what happens is these dudes read the pages of history with those two lenses. It's basically a hermeneutic of skepticism and hypersensitivity to Black dignity when they're reading through, the pages of history. So it's like anytime they can, usurp something for the purpose of, their retelling, their mythical retelling of history, that's what happens. Now, yeah, I mean, I'm hype about Black dignity too. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that all people have dignity. I think there's nothing wrong with taking an appropriate type of pride in your ethnic heritage. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But when that becomes the hermeneutic through which you eisegete history, I'm saying when you insert things into history that aren't there, that's when you are on the trek to no longer pursue truth. You just make stuff up as you go. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Got a couple super chats here, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate everybody showing love. Definitely appreciate it. So
you just bought 30 more minutes of content, man. We got to go 30 extra minutes.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. But let's is there anything else you want to show? Any slides or we
No, I'm good on that one. Yeah, I'm
all right,
good
cool.
on that one. Yeah.
All right, let's
I said Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are merely fragments from the periphery of the African spiritual system that you call voodoo. People say, you can't even go there with that. I can go there with that. And I can take on any theologian that you got, bring them down, and I'll show you. Give me your 12 tribes. Give me your 12 disciples. Give me your 99 pearls of faith of Islam, and I'll show you those are nothing but sets of qualities and attributes, and I can juxtapose them in a perpendicular line besides the Orishas of the Yoruba, besides the Loas of the Voodoo, besides the Netters of Egypt, and show you we're talking about the same system.
Jesus is a name.
You can stop there.
Which did not come.
Okay.
We're about to get to my favorite part, but go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So he says, as Judaism, Christianity, Islam merely fragments from the periphery of the American spiritual system that you call voodoo, because you can't even go to everything. I can go there with them. I could take on any, that they messed up the spelling there. Bring them down. I'll show you. Give me your 12 tribes. Give me your 12 disciples. Give me your pearls of faith of Islam. And I'll show you that these are nothing but sets of qualities and attributes. And I can't just suppose them in a perpendicular line besides the Orishas of the Yoruba, besides the Loas of the Voodoo. It was Loa, not Lois. Besides the Netters of Egypt, and show you we're talking about the same system. Now, when I hear this, when me and Adam and many of us hear this claim, the question we always need to ask ourselves, did the original people that believed in these things have the same understanding as he does? Right? That's always a question you got to ask. It's like, that sounds really cool, but did the people who actually, the original practitioners, did they see this the same way? Did they see it as attributes? Where does he get it from? Well, it's interesting where he does get it from. And many of them, they actually get it from someone by the name of Plutarch. And I've discussed Plutarch before. And P.D. Scott.
What's that sound effect sound of the guy?
I've spoken on Plutarch many a time. So in the Journal of Hellenic Studies, it says here, it need hardly be said that all this is not in the least Egyptian. Yet it is interesting to note how throughout the treatise, Plutarch seems thoroughly to believe that his ideas are the same as those held by the educated Egyptian priesthood, that he, in common with them, is possessed of an esoteric gnosis about the Egyptian deities. The vulgar might indulge in the gross forms of superstition derided by Greeks and Romans alike, but for those initiated in the mysteries of Isis, there was the doctrine on which he dilates in his treatise of which the polytheism worship of animals is only the outer form. Okay, this is a man who can't even read the metal letter, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
Plutarch can't read the hieroglyphics, but he's saying, well, it's too gross. They can't really believe that these deities are this manner. It has to mean something else.
Right.
Right. To go on, it says, again, with Plutarch, as with all foreigners, the animal gods of Egypt were a sore stumbling block, and he is fain to pass them off as mere symbols or utilitarian interpretation.
Well, that sounds familiar.
Sounds very familiar, right? But the Greeks and Egyptians, or Egyptial Greeks, brought up under Hellenic influence, desired, like Plutarch himself, to steer a middle course between atheism and superstition. Wherefore, the grosser side of the Egyptian religion was dropped or treated symbolically. You want to talk about the white man's religion? You want to talk about whitewashing? This is Plutarch.
Uh-oh.
He looked at these African religions and said, these are nasty and icky. This can't be what they were talking about. Let me fix this for you. Let me sprinkle a little of my European Greco-Roman Gnosticism in here and course correct this, because it can't be this.
Hey, when did Plutarch live?
1st, 2nd century?
Something like that, So it was interesting. So yeah, that sounds about right. Something, the ancient world. I just find it interesting that they want to talk about Christianity colonizing this, colonizing that, but through Plutarch, Cometicism got colonized back in like the 1st century. Whatever he lived, like it got colonized. It didn't even make out of the ancient world before it got colonized. You know what I'm saying? And whitewashed. I just find that interesting. I'm just saying. I also got.
Wait a minute. My bad. I got one more.
Oh yeah. Do you think?
I got one more on this. The ascetic philosopher of Alexandria, again speaking about Plutarch, adopted a shaven crown and white linen robes. Was a member of an artificial esoteric society that was called into being by the intermixture of Greek and Egyptian civilization. But it is to Plutarch we owe our knowledge of this society, and his mistakes and misconceptions show us the distance by which it had become separated from its Egyptian original. So
it's bars, bro. It's bars.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got a couple on here too, man.
All right, let's go.
I got to get them. So, Professor Small said some interesting stuff. So, first of all, again, when I'm listening to things like this, I always want to ask myself, is this something I should be moved by? Should I be moved by what this person just said? Now, when you listen to what he said, he says, I can, show how Christianity is just from the periphery of Africa and how it just basically is this copy from, is a ripoff of African spiritual systems. I can line them up, amongst or alongside the Orishas, and I can do this and I can do that. But he doesn't actually do it in this video. Now, granted, I'm sure he wasn't called upon to do that in this particular video. But as I'm sitting there watching it, should I be moved by that? Well, no, because there's been no evidence provided that he indeed can do this. I'm saying it's just a baseless assertion as far as this video is concerned. So it's cool that he says he makes the claim that he can do it, but he hasn't shown it. So there's no reason why I should be moved just by somebody saying that they can do X, Y, and Z. It remains to be seen as to whether he can carry that out with argumentation. Secondly, what we most often see is an overemphasis on similarities, right? But we need to remember that similarities and sameness are two different things. You know what I'm saying? As a matter of fact, what you end up doing is when people overemphasize similarities without taking into account differences, then you end up with the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. It's an informal fallacy called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. And the imagery is kind of like, let's say, for example, if I'm shooting at a barn and I hit the barn like 4 or 5 times, and then I take, some paint and then paint a bullseye around where I just shot at, you know what I'm saying? And then you come along and see, oh man, he must be a pretty good shot. Well, no, actually I created the imagery that I was a good shot by, deceptively, if you will. And likewise, it's the same thing when people overemphasize similarities without taking into account dissimilarities, and then just basically making an overreach. So I'm gonna do a quick pop quiz right quick, just kind of illustrate this. All right. So I'm gonna name out. I'm not gonna give the name of this person. I'm gonna see if y'all can guess who it is that I'm talking about with this next slide. All right. See the people in the chat. Let me see how sharp y'all are. All right. So who I've got in mind? I've got an NBA legend from Ohio. All right. I'll give you some facts about this person. He's an NBA star, multiple-time NBA champion, multiple-time All-Star. He won the scoring title. He has won the scoring title. He's considered one of the greatest to ever play. Currently plays on an NBA team in California, and he was born in Akron City Hospital in Ohio. So let me see in the chat, like who do y'all think I'm talking about? I got the picture right there. I'm giving y'all a hint. I don't know how many hints I got to give y'all. I'm telling you, I'm putting it right in front of you. Who do y'all think it is in the chat? Who do you think it is? Who do you think I'm talking about, Alfredo?
Oh, listen, I'm from Brooklyn. You can't line me up. I already know what this is. This is a setup. So please.
LeBron James. Oh, I see somebody sharp. We got a couple sharp people in the chat. Very good, very good. So many people see LeBron James. If you said LeBron James, we're talking about Steph Curry, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, we're talking about both of them because they're both NBA legends from Ohio. They were both born in the same hospital, and all those other things apply. Now, notice all the similarities, right? I just lined up like 8 similarities, even down to where they were born. Yet and still, we're talking about 2 different individuals, right? So it's not enough to just throw out similarities and think that you've made your case and to demonstrate that there's some sort of sameness between 2 individuals. So likewise, when it comes to comparing Jesus to somebody like a Horus, or there's another one that's coming up later. I'm not going to spoil it in the video. Or whether it be what's the dude? The born out of a rock. I don't know. It's
Mithras,
right now.
Mithras,
right? Exactly. You're a Christian or whoever. You know what I'm saying? When they try to line them up against all these different figures and try to line Jesus up against that, you know what I mean? Again, they harp on the similarities, but they don't deal with the dissimilarities. Particularly of a historical nature, which we'll get into later on. But I just want to kind of illustrate that to show how fallacious it is. Again, we're talking about, so people can get it, we're talking about the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. I'm saying it's just fallacious to ignore the differences while focusing on the similarities. And that's what he's doing. So thus far, is there anything that should be moving me in this video? Well, certainly not from Brother Smalls right here. You know what I'm saying? Because he's giving me a fallacious argument and baseless assertions. So regardless of how it makes me feel, regardless of whether it brings me into this place where I'm really contemplating my Africanness or whatever, all that aside, in terms of the content that he's putting on the table, it's fallacious. And we just shouldn't follow bad reasoning, fallacious reasoning, when we're making decisions, particularly of a significant nature, i.e. about worldviews and so forth. All right.
Cool. So let's continue the onslaught.
Yes, sir.
To existence in the English form.
We went that a little bit.
The letter J was not invented until the 1600s, which did not come into.
Besides the Neters of Egypt, and show you we're talking about the same system.
Jesus is a name which did not come into existence in the English form until the 1600s. The letter J was not invented until the 1600s. Let me say this again. Now, the letter J was not invented until the 1600s. So the reality is, Jesus is not the name of that person. His name is an Amharic name, Yeshua.
You stop it there.
I just realized something too. Did you say, is it Amharic?
Yeah. Which is no, it's Hebrew. Or if anything, it's
I think he's trying to say Aramaic. I think that's what he was trying. He said
let's be charitable and say that's what he was saying. That's what he was going for.
Okay, all right.
So all them letter J memes, you ever wonder where they came from? Here we go. This is where it comes from. Ground zero, guys. Ground zero. And again, right? It's letters represent sounds. The sounds that represent the letter J have been around for a very long time, and all they did was try to separate, the consonants, the hard and the soft sounds of J.
Sure.
There used to be the I. So they made an I and a J to make that separation, to make it, I guess, in certain scripts, easier to pronounce certain words in the written form. Because if you're going to say there's no J, so that because the inference being made is that, well, if there wasn't a J, then that Jesus wasn't the name that he was called during that time, which would be true. But what they're really trying to infer is, well, that means he didn't really exist. That's the inference, which is a horrible reach. I mean, Reed Richards type of reaching, right? Mr. Fantastic Time, right? It doesn't. No, you know what I mean? It's like it's a reach. Right, that has nothing to do, because if that's the case, then there's no such thing as justice, because justice starts with the letter J. Jerusalem does not exist.
Jumping. Nobody ever jumped
ever
before 1600s, because the letter J wasn't created.
Exactly. You see how that works?
Nobody ever jumped before 1600s.
Right. There was no tribe of Judah. No Judah. No Judah did not exist.
Yo,
and that's it, really. That's all we're gonna spend time. Like it really is that simple to, no slice for that.
Well, I do have one.
Right, let's go.
This right here, this claim. Let me bring it back here. I'm not gonna play it again. But this moment right here, I want everybody in the chat to give a big thank you to Anthony Browder. That's who this brother is, right? If it were not for him, there may not be a true ID. This clip right here, I'm telling you, this is the clip that convinced me, you know what I'm saying, that my Christian faith was safe. like I kid you not. I remember I was listening to this joint. The first time I heard this joint, I'm like, man, they're coming against Christianity, blah, 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 blah. And like, I'm thinking about getting into apologetics, and I wasn't really sure. But when I heard this claim right here, I was like, oh, snap. If this is what their scholars are talking about, if this is the best they got, I'm good. like we good, fam. This right here, this is really what convinced me to launch into apologetics ministry. I'm not making this up. Like, this really was a turning point. I won't say it's the only thing. This really was a turning point. When I saw how weak this argument was, and that this is one of their top guys, I realized that there was nothing to be afraid of with respect to the arguments that the Catholic community was bringing to the table, and I could dive in with apologetics with some more confidence than I previously had. That's real rap. That really did happen.
Wow.
With that being said, I got to get him on this joint.
Oh,
so I'm not going to go into depth, because I feel like it's been dealt with quite a bit. But for the sake of it, just think about the logic, right? So first of all, again, we're dealing with the infamous, letter J argument. I think what we have here is actually an example of special pleading fallacy. And then hear me on this. So the special pleading fallacy is when you're applying standards, principles, and or rules to other people or circumstances while making oneself or certain circumstances exempt from the same critical criteria without providing adequate justification, right? Now, when it comes to any ancient text, right, I don't care what language it is. I don't care if they're reading the Magi-Netter. I don't care, what it is. If they're trying to write out what something is said, excuse me, say some piece of the Magi-Netter, hieroglyphics, if you will. If they're trying to write something out in English, they're going to be using characters that the ancient Egyptians would not have used, right? And there are going to be certain things that are pronounced in certain ways that we pronounce them that will probably pronounce differently, amongst those indigenous people. That's not anything unusual. That's exactly what you would expect to find when you're dealing with ancient texts. So when it comes to making this special case about the letter J, because he literally says that, oh yeah, his name was Yeshua. Well, yeah, okay, there you go. In the ancient text, you would find Yeshua or Jesus. Now, as far as the New Testament. Now, so if that's a problem, if the letter J is a problem, for the Christian, then any modern rendering of any ancient text should be a problem for practitioners for those perspectives as well. So don't talk to me about what Wallace Buzz translated from, your Magi-Netter. Like, please don't, or anybody else for that matter. I'm saying, unless you're reading it in the original languages, then don't talk to me about what your Magi-Netter says. And the reality is, you're not going to be able to read what it says in the Magi-Netter without learning the Magi-Netter first. And you probably got to learn that starting with your original language to give you a bridge to learn that language. So whichever way you go, you're going to have to rely upon modern language to even understand the ancient language that you're trying to get to. But you can't do that and then make the letter J problematic for the Christian at the same time. Secondly, when it's very simple. I mean, obviously, I agree with him. Jesus would have been referred to as Yeshua, most likely, as he was walking the earth by his disciples and stuff like that. Nevertheless, when you think about it, and we don't have to go too far afield in here, but the New Testament was written in Koine Greek, you know what I'm saying, because that was the common language at the time. And as you have people, spreading the gospel, they want to reach as many people as possible. So we're going to write in Koine Greek. And what's interesting is that the New Testament authors, including some folks who actually walked with Jesus, wrote his name in Koine Greek, which was, it would have been Iesus. I'm saying that would have been the Greek transliteration. Right. Now, if the people who actually walked with Christ and were first generation disciples didn't have a problem with transliteration, which is different than translation. Transliteration is when you're taking a word from one language that doesn't fit snugly in the phonetics or spelling in another language, and you have to change around certain letters to make it fit. That's what transliteration is. If the first century disciples, I'm saying those who actually walked with Christ, had no problem referring to him as Jesus in the Koine Greek, then why should we have a problem with it 2,000 years later? Refer to him, by English name. Obviously, that's not the point. I'm saying that's not problematic, I should say. And so it's just silly, man. And also nothing follows from it that's problematic from Christianity. Given the fact that you have a translation, transliteration, and so forth, that doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying? In other places, he'll go a step further and make that claim, but I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Let's keep it going.
That person, his name is an Amharic name, Yeshua.
1482, Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint a painting of Christ and the 12 disciples. This was 1482, 10 years before Columbus set sail, because that painting would be the greatest weapon used in colonialism, and still is right now, because many black people around the world still have that original Last Supper. And so when Leonardo was asked to paint that picture, he got his uncle to actually sit in, and this is an historic record. He got his uncle to sit in and pose as Christ, and he got 12 criminals from a local jail who happened to be available to sit in as the 12 disciples.
You can stop there.
Criminals
just happen to be available. Yeah, if you're in prison, you're very available if you're in prison. right?
Yeah, why would you not be available?
Right. So anyway, 1482, Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint a painting of Christ and the 12 disciples. This was 1480 to 10 years before Columbus set sail, because that painting would be the greatest weapon used in colonialism, and still is right now, because many black people around the world still have the original Last Supper. And so when Leonardo was asked to paint that picture, he got his uncle to actually sit in. This is in the historic record, he says. He got his uncle to sit in and pose as Christ, and he got 12 criminals from a local jail who happened to be available to sit in as the 12 disciples. Again, it's the sneaky inferences. Right? They're not saying what they want you to, it's a setup. They want you to figure it out in your own brain, right? Because why did they have to get specifically criminals to represent their apostles? Unless there is a connection between criminality and the followers of Christ. That's what he wants you to come to your own conclusion. So he sets this alley-oop for you so that you can make that connection. But here's the thing. In Da Vinci and his times, eyewitness books, Andrew Langley, when painting the Last Supper, Leonardo spent a lot of time wandering through the jails of Milan looking for a suitable model for Judas. Now, that kind of makes sense, right? Because Judas betrayed Jesus. He was looking for somebody of ill repute.
Makes sense.
So he went into the prisons to find someone that matches that particular connotation. He didn't get 12 disciples. He got Judas. And that kind of makes sense. There wasn't 12 disciples. He didn't get 12 criminals. Right. But you see what he tried to do? Mm-hmm. He set up this thing so that you could infer this correlation between the criminal underworld and followers of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, bro.
Actually, can you go to the slide right before that? Because I didn't have a slide for this, but I meant to. And you covered something really important.
Which one? Which slide?
I think it's the one right before this, where you're talking about this right. Oh yeah, let's go forward. Yeah, that one? Right there. Yeah, that one right there. Because you said something really important. I can't remember how you worded it, but you keyed in on something important. So a lot of times, what you'll see And to be honest, I've talked about this before, particularly with Umar Johnson. But a lot of times what you'll see is that people will take certain historical facts or claims or facts. I'll just say facts for sake of argument. They'll take historical facts and they'll glue them together in their argumentation with bad inferences. Bad by meaning illogical inferences or unjustified connections. That happens all the time. So what happens is it's like a boxer. I'm saying, a boxer will lead with the jab and he's setting you up for the right hook, with the right cross, right? So the jab is the historical facts that most people accept to be true, right? Or seem reasonably true. And then the right hook is the bad logic, gluing those facts together as they formulate a bigger argument. They do this all the time. You know what I'm saying? So for example, if you listen to what he says here, it says 1482, Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint a painting of Christ and the 12 disciples. This was 8 to 10 years before Columbus set sail, because that painting would be the greatest weapon used in colonialism and still is right now. Now, that word because, right? So now he's saying that the reason why Leonardo DiCaprio was commissioned to paint this painting, right?
Did you say Leonardo DiCaprio?
Dang, that's crazy. Oh, that's hilarious, yo. Leonardo da Vinci. So Umar Johnson is saying that Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint this painting because it would be the greatest weapon of colonialism, right? Now, here's the thing. In order to make that claim in any way compelling, right? In order to make that claim, he needs to substantiate that because he's got to provide some evidence. He's got to give us some primary source evidence that it is indeed the case that the reason why Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned was because they were going to use this picture of white Jesus for colonialism. Right. Now, what he's relying on you to do is to just take the timeline and be like, oh yeah, he did this right before colonialism. So it must have been because they were going to use this image as a weapon, a spiritual,
a propaganda tool.
Propaganda tool. You know what I'm saying? Now, it is indeed the case that white Jesus was often used as propaganda, but he, in order for him to justify that, because he's got to give us some primary source evidence. He's got to give us like some sort of maybe in the document that they wrote out to commission him that they list out the reason, or he's got to give us some reason to believe his because. You know what I'm saying? Or else it's just conjecture that's not substantiated with evidence. And while we're at it, if you're interested in more on that topic, then you should cop Jerome Gay's book,
Absolutely,
the Whitewashing of Christianity. Because as much as I disagree with Umar Johnson or many things that he says, it is indeed the case that Christians ought to be about truth, and in so much as we do have misrepresentations of Christianity floating around, we need to be about the business of correcting that. And I think that Jerome Gay does a fantastic job in the whitewashing of Christianity and doing
absolutely, it's a must get. Now, for those who don't know, this documentary is basically what ushers in Umar Johnson as an actual personality, right? This is what makes him who he is today. We all have the jokes, whatever, about him in the school and let me get your grit money and all that. Well, this is where he becomes who he is today. It's from this series. You know what I mean? So again, that another reason to to have some commentary about what we're seeing. So can we continue, sir? We good?
Yeah, we're good, man.
All right,
yep.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Let's go.
The only reason you call God by that name is because your former enslaver, your former oppressor taught you that name. He never taught you the real name. He never gave you the keys to the power to free yourself spiritually, so that you are now spiritually or religiously still a slave.
The African population in North America is the third largest.
I want to say something about that real quick. Did you want to play a little bit? Okay, cool. I can be real fast with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
He says the only reason that you refer to God by that name is that your enslaver taught it to you. Well, again, I'm trying to pick out logical consistency and in these arguments, and I keep finding more and more fallacies. That's the fact of the matter. So again, share, do I need to push the share button, or can you?
Oh, my bad. I wasn't paying attention. There we go.
Good old genetic fallacy. that's what you have. You know, if you're trying to take a jab at Christianity and undermine the truth of it, if you want to insinuate that it's false and so on and so forth, and you're trying to leverage this notion that, well, the only reason that you call upon that name is because, you know, your enslavers taught that to you. Well, again, that's going to be the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy is when you base the truth claim of an argument on its origin, or, you know, how somebody came to believe it, and things of that nature. That's what you're dealing with genetic fallacy. It's fallacious, right? Because the truth value of something is independent on how you came to believe it. That's a fact of it. That's just logic 101. Aside from that, it's actually just not even true that, oh, the only reason that, you know, you call upon that name is because your slave master told it to you. Well, there's plenty of Africans who call upon that name that were never enslaved. You know, over the last 2,000 years, there's been, you know, slews of them. Christianity has been on the continent of Africa for about 2,000 years, with 1,400 of that coming before the transatlantic slave trade. And we actually have, I got a video on it on my channel. You know, we actually have evidence that you have Christianity in West Africa prior to the transatlantic slave trade. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, particularly in the kingdom of Mali. So to say that, you know, the only reason why we believe it, even if that were true, that doesn't undercut whether or not Christianity is true. Even if it were true that every black person in America only came to believe in Christianity because, you know, the slave master, I mean, that would speak to the predicament by which we came to encounter something, but it wouldn't tell you whether or not God exists. It wouldn't undermine that. It wouldn't undermine whether or not Jesus was God. It wouldn't undermine whether or not Jesus rose from the dead. It wouldn't cut against any of those claims upon which Christianity is founded. So Christianity could, from A to Z, be entirely true, you know, and it could be the case, you know, even if it were the case that the only reason we call upon Jesus is because we were taught it during slavery. Now, that's not in fact the case. It's actually not in fact true that that's the only reason we came into contact with it. But I'm just really getting at the fallaciousness of the argument. Last thing I'm gonna say there is, let's say that you have a person who did indeed come in contact with Christianity through slavery, right? And that's how they came to believe on Jesus. Let's say you get, that's person A, and you have person B, who is an Ethiopian at the same time, which has never been colonized, and they came to believe on Jesus because that's just part of Ethiopian heritage, going back to, you know, Frumentius, and it was like the 4th century or so, right? 5th century.
King of Zana, right?
King of Zana, and so forth. Now, let's say both of those people die today, right? Or I'll just put it back during slavery times. Both of those people die in 1845, right? And, you know, the one person says, you know, I was believing on you, Jesus, because, you know, I was taught that by the slave master, but I left alone because the slave master taught it to me. And then the Ethiopian says, I've been standing with you because it's true, you know, regardless of how I came to know it. It's, you know, I'm glad you're my Lord and Savior, right? How stupid would it be, right, for the person who was the African enslaved person to be like, I'm just going to reject Jesus and eternity, you know what I'm saying, because, you know, because, you know, some slave master did some really heinous things, and that's how I encountered it. Right. Rather than say, in spite of the wickedness of man, in spite of how heinous and evil, you know, these white enslavers were, you know what I'm saying, and how just the fact that they gave us the slave Bible, it didn't give us the whole gospel, first of all. The fact that they actually tried to keep us from Christianity because they believed that we would get notions of equality from it, and so on and so forth. You know, rather than me acknowledge that God was able to move man aside and still, you know, allow me to encounter him, I'm going to just throw it all away. I'm just going to throw my whole eternity away from that. That's dumb. That's dumb.
And we know that these enslaved people knew the difference.
Of course they did.
We don't give our ancestors the
oh man, I was about to go
you
there.
Know,
I'm glad
the credit.
You did. Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, bro. I'm sorry.
Because this is my pet peeve personally. You know what I'm saying? Number one, it's dumb because truth is truth regardless of how you encounter it. You know what I'm saying, and when the stakes are high, like your eternal your eternal state, then I mean it's not something to be played with flippantly. You know what I'm saying? That being said, it doesn't make sense for you to throw away your eternity for the sake of what some evil person did. You know what I'm saying? That's dumb. You know what I mean? In addition to that, though, it's not the case that our ancestors were just a bunch of dumb, brainwashed individuals who just got duped into Christianity because they didn't know any better. You know what I'm saying? People need to stop doing that. What happens is, in an effort to try to preserve the dignity of Africans, they actually end up trampling upon the dignity of their African forefathers and foremothers who did believe on Christ of their own volition, of their own will. We actually have, I'm trying to think where it is. It's like right here. voices from slavery, right? I'm trying to think some other
narratives. The slave narratives.
Right. So these are former enslaved persons speaking about their experiences in their own words. And when you look into texts like these, you see examples where you would have a slave master who was about to die, and he would ask all the slaves to come to the big house, so to speak, and he would be apologizing to them, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did this terrible thing," and so on and so forth. And they would just have this terror. Like, this is documented. This is documented, in slave narratives, right? And what you find is this, many times, well, I'll just say there are instances where enslaved persons will respond like, "Oh yeah, it's all good," and then they would go back to their quarters and be like, "Yo, he went straight to hell." You know what I'm saying? Like they knew. You know what I'm saying, that the slave master wasn't going to get away with just doing all this dirt. You know what I'm saying? Like, they understood there was a difference between a righteous and holy God who, in spite of their circumstances, found a way, you know what I'm saying, through their experiences, through various different, preaching of the gospel, independent from the slave master church and so on and so forth, found a way for them to experience that grace. And they understood that there was a difference between that and this caricature, this heinous, hellish caricature of Christianity that was being perpetrated upon them by the slave masters. They weren't dumb, man. I'm saying, and so I think what we need to do is we need to stop. Well, I'm not saying what these people need to do is stop propping themselves up on a just dumbified version of our African enslaved forefathers and foremothers. And if you're gonna rebel against God, then do so on your own 2 feet. Don't tread upon our ancestors to do that. Simple as that. That's one of my pet peeves.
No, absolutely. That was beautiful stated. Beautiful.
All right.
Cool. So, all right, let's keep it going.
Black population in the world in any geopolitical state.
Actually, rewind this a little bit.
Yeah, rewind.
So that you are now spiritually or religiously still a slave.
The African population in North America is the 3rd largest black population in the world in any geopolitical state. Why don't we have a single word out of one of our language for God that we use? The Arabs use their word for God. The Jews use their word for God. The Catholics use their word for God. The Japanese use their word for God. The African is the only population that don't have an African word for God. Yet, studies coming out of Geneva over the last 30 years prove that we are the most spiritual people in America, in the world, not just America. We
can stop there.
Greater propensity than any other.
Okay. Wow. So this man says, why don't we have a single word out of our language for God? That we see that the Arabs use their word for God, the Jews use a word for God, the Catholics use their word for God, the Japanese use their word for God. The African is the only population that don't have an African word for God. Wow. This is very lazy. Like, when he said this, I'm like, really? And this is a man who has spent, a good portion of his time back and forth from the continent to America.
Yeah, so I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he's one of those guys that
he spends a lot of time.
Spends a lot of time over there.
He has and he has a partnership where they actually own a hotel on the continent.
Right.
So he always travels back and forth. It's just so weird for him to say this. And what I've noticed,
it's sloppy, man. Yeah,
it's super sloppy. And I'm going to show you why it's so sloppy in a minute. But it's what I've noticed, and I'm sure Adam noticed this too, what these video clips do. Now, mind you, this is a 14-minute segment, but they cram so much, well, in my opinion, pseudo information.
Yeah, it was hard to prepare for this joint, man.
It really was.
It was so much error. You know what I'm saying?
But this is what they do. It's like buckshot coming out of a shotgun. All these pellets hitting you at the same time.
Right.
And they're hoping that you don't take the time out to look at each individual pellet. This is by design. Because this, right? Because the quick editing, you got Kara's one, you got Umar, you got this guy, you got that guy, and then spin all these different facts. So you just taking it all in.
Right.
And they slip this thing in. And it's like, wait a minute. There isn't an African word for God? Really?
Come on, bro.
Angola don't have a name for it. Botswana don't have a name. Burundi don't. The Cameroon, Congo, Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya. None of these nations have names for gods. Malawi, Madagascar, Liberia, Mozambique, Namibia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Sudan, Swaziland. None of these individuals have names for their days. Nobody.
Come on, man. That's wild, bro. Nobody.
Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe. None of these people have names for their gods.
You're right.
And not only that, right? Courtesy of our good friend Dr. Vince Bantu,
yes, sir.
In his chapter in Urban Apologetics, restoring black unity with the gospel, he starts his chapter with a glossary of various African terms that the Christians who were in Africa for how many centuries, Adam?
Oh man, I mean 2000. You say century,
like 5 centuries, right?
5 centuries, yeah, that's right.
Right, the Bizrod, right? Get E for gospel.
Before Europe. I'm sorry, yeah,
right. Nazwari, you got Nuda, right? You got the Ruah Yahweh, you got the Sudja, the Urpa, right? All these various African terms were used by Christians to contextualize and express their orthodoxy. So this idea that Africans had no, that was so weird.
It's weird
to me,
bro.
That he did that.
That's weird, bro. And to his credit, I mean, Dr. Bantu, Dr. Vince Bantu, he is always harping on reclaiming African language for the purposes of expressing our affection, devotion, faith, and so forth. Just basically toward God. And I think that he's right about that. I mean, it is something that we definitely need to be intentional about, because he talks about all the time. Why not say praise? I think it's Tilla. If I could be getting that wrong, but I think praise Tilla. Why not say that? Of course, you can say that. That's an African word. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's the beauty of Christianity, is that it's not so culturally stringent that you can't, incorporate aspects of various different, ethnic heritage and so forth. And as long as it doesn't, contradict with Orthodox teaching, then it's all fair game. But one thing I wanted to say about it too is that, again, it's just really sad. I mean, he's oversimplifying a pretty significant issue here, and in the process, doing a disservice, I think, to African heritage. I'm gonna show you why. Because I talked about earlier about the African contributions to Christianity, and to some extent, it has to do with what we're talking about here. We talked about names. As I said, African contributions to Christianity are more than just name deep. He's just talking about the name of God, or how we refer to God. But if you go back to Tertullian, North African theologian, likely a Berber. As a matter of fact, I of the Berber tribe, which is an indigenous African people group. I have a book right here by David Wilhite, called Tertullian the African. It's by David Wilhite, and he gives his argumentation as to why, when you look at some of Tertullian's writings, it's reasonable to conclude that he was an indigenous African, right? That being said, Tertullian, he's the one that we can credit for our use of the term Trinity in the church. We're talking about Father, Son, Holy Spirit. The term Trinity comes from the Latin word Trinitas, and you find Tertullian using that in his work as he's talking about what we refer to as the Trinity. I'm saying it gives you, Tertullian gives you like a early rendering of our Orthodox notion of the Trinity, right? Also conceptually, this is even more important, because this gets beyond just wording, right? But you find this notion of tre persona una substantia in Tertullian's work. So 3 persons, 1 substance, right? That's conceptually, that's what we're referring to when we're talking about the Godhead, i.e. the Trinity. And so this language was later incorporated at Nicaea into the Nicene Creed. And by incorporated, I mean was the concept that they used to kind of hash out and articulate it. So I said that to say that you have a North African theologian who not only contributes to how we refer to, but also how we understand the Godhead. You know what I'm saying? And he's contributing to the language that is used as Christian orthodoxy. Last little tidbit, but the words, Old Testament and New Testament. You say if you trace those back in terms of how we commonly use them today. I got this from F.F. Bruce's book on the canon, but he talks about how those terms, Old Testament and New Testament, in terms of how we use them today, that can be attributed to Tertullian. So every time you open up your Bible, we talk about the Old Testament and New Testament, you're talking about terms that have come into Christian vocabulary through Tertullian, the North African theologian, right? So for him to say, "Oh, we just don't have this name for name for God." I mean, again, he doesn't know much about the African contributions to Christianity and Christian heritage. Simple as that.
Good stuff, my friend. Good stuff, man. All right, let's keep getting them.
Keep going. Hey,
in the world, but we don't have a single word in our language for our divine.
The word Christ is a title. It's not a name. Christ means the anointed one. And there were many people before the birth of Jesus who also bore that title, Christ. There were 16 people who were known as Christ. So Jesus was the last of saviors of mankind, saviors of a group of people who were known as Christ.
When you talk about the image of Christ, it is important that we no longer...
Okay. Did you want to say something on that, or?
I mean, quickly. So the word Christ, right, is from the Hebrew Mashiach, which means anointed, which actually literally means to smear on, right? Because when someone came into power, when the king was enthroned, the priest would smear him with oil as a dedication to this newly appointed king. So yes, Jesus wasn't the first person to be called Christ. Absolutely, right? If you have been appointed to be king, yes, you were considered the anointed one. Absolutely. They think they're killing us, but by making that point, it's like, yeah, that's what the word means. Okay, but Jesus is what? The anointed one. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Oh, and let me give you a freebie. That phrase, King of King, also comes from the Eastern Near East. Jesus wasn't the first person to be called King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Ooh, see what I did there?
Right.
Why should that scare me? It's like, of course they're going to use terms and phrases that were familiar to the people of those times and places.
Of course they would.
Of course they're going to use Christ. Right. When explaining Jesus. Yeah.
And the thing is, when you find culture or people from certain cultures using language from either there or surrounding cultures, really what that's indicative is that you have a person who is indeed from where they claim to be from. It makes sense, why you would find certain terminology in the scriptures, because they're interacting, with the cultures around them, and polemically or for other reasons, using certain terminology. Now, I do want to say something real quick. I got another slide. I promise, man, I'm gonna slow down here in a minute, man.
Let's get them, man. They know what this is. They know
what this is, man. Right? All right, brother Brown. I had to get him.
He might as well just quote the book, right? He might as well just quoted it.
He might as well. He might as well. Right. Now, first I'm gonna deal with the fallacy, right? Because he talks about how there was 16 saviors, or Jesus was the last of the 16, and so forth. Now, I already dealt with like the similarities thing when I did the whole Texas sharpshooter fallacy, so I won't cover that again. I'm just going to give you a different angle at it, because he talks about chronology. You had these 15 saviors before Christ, and then Christ is the last one. You deal with chronology a little bit, but unfortunately for him, that's another fallacy. We've got the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. All right, so that that's basically defined as claiming that because event Y followed event X, then event Y must have been caused by event X, without properly establishing causality, right? So just because Jesus is a savior figure and comes along after these other 16 that he's supposed to, and actually we can break those down as well anyway, but I'm just not going to for right now. But even if it is the case that he comes after all these folks, that in and of itself, that chronology, and even with the similarity of the savior figure, that doesn't in and of itself establish Browder's case that therefore Jesus was derived from these other savior narratives, right? He's got to do more work than that. I'm saying, because again, it says here without properly establishing causality. What Browder would have to do would be to demonstrate that his account of how the Jesus narrative came about is a better explanation than just looking at the heritage and history of the Jewish people and their text. I'm saying I can account for all the teachings in the New Testament about Christ from their history and heritage, right? And their text. In order for him to step outside of their history and heritage and start bringing in, this savior over here from that culture and that one over there, the more different saviors he brings in, he's adding on layers of explanation that began to make his theory of how Christ came about and the narratives about Christ coming about more top heavy, right? And from a historical standpoint, we talk about methodology. A top heavy explanation is not to be preferred over one that fits the bill for describing the events that we're concerned about and is less complex. I think that's just basic historical methodology. And shout out to David Richardson. He did an excellent job when he was debating Richard Carrier recently and hashing that out. I mean, he really demonstrated the types of assumptions, unwarranted assumptions, and hoops that you have to jump through, as Richard Carrier did, in order to substantiate that sort of a case. Now, that being said, there's one thing that differentiates Jesus from the other people that Kersey Graves want to associate in this line of saviors is that there's a ridiculous amount of historical evidence, comparatively speaking. I'm saying, when we talk about evidence stacking up for Jesus as opposed to the average person, living in his day or other notable figures in his day, Jesus stands head and shoulders above other figures in terms of being well attested in early sources. That's historical sources, primary sources. That's just a fact of the matter. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to the central claim about Jesus' life, the resurrection, like everything builds up toward the crucifixion and resurrection in the Gospels. I'm saying that's like the centerpiece of his life. And even for that, we have independent sources attesting to the circumstances and facts surrounding the resurrection of Jesus Christ, such that you can actually make a historical argument. You make an argument for the historicity of the resurrection from the historical data. I actually have a video on that on my channel, as a matter of fact. And then lastly, I mean, it's just silly, man. I mean, 16 Crucified Saviors by Kersey Graves. That's really what he's pulling from. It's just been outdated and discredited. Quite frankly, the idea of looking at Jesus through the lens of mythology as a backdrop for understanding what's being claimed about him is just that whole framework is out of date. You know what I'm saying? Modern historians understand that the proper framework to understand Jesus and the claims about him is through the backdrop of Jewish history, heritage, and what you find going on during that time. You know what I'm saying? Within the Jewish community. So on just several different levels, he's appealing to bad scholarship and then regurgitating bad scholarship. That's what he's doing. And perpetuated. So there we go.
Pretty much. It's zombie talking points. You shoot them, and they still walking around.
Keep on coming back
on your timeline.
They keep on coming back. Right.
All right, let's keep it going.
Ascribe to the European image of Christ. Why? Because
rewind that a little bit.
The brain is a associating organism. It stores everything. When you talk about the image of Christ, it is important.
Of saviors of mankind, saviors of a group of people who were known as Christ.
When you talk about the image of Christ, it is important that we no longer ascribe to the European image of Christ. Why? Because the brain is a associating organism. It stores everything as pictures. And because it is associating, if you force feed an African child that Christ is white, because the brain associates, as that child begins to grow, the brain will associate white Christ with white people. And so if white Jesus is God, then white people must also be the gods of humanity. And so guess what? The power in the painting is transferred to the people who resemble that painting. And so it is difficult to pray to a white Jesus and not in some way feel inferior to white people. And that's why when I talk to Christian ministers, I often tell them you have to change these pictures. They say it don't matter. Of course it matters. Why do you think the European went around the world and systematically altered the image of Christ in every major cathedral, every major church, every corner of the globe? Because it is difficult to oppress a people whose image of the God doesn't look like the oppressor. But when God and the oppressor look one in the same, then the people will come to believe that the oppression was ordained by God.
Stop it there.
Theatric music right there.
No, it was great. It was great. But I mean, I think we need to be honest and say that the vehicle of white Jesus has been used and weaponized to endanger and to oppress the marginalized people. Has that been always the case? Is that an axiomatic statement? No.
Right.
No. But has it been used in a weaponized fashion? That's true too.
Sure.
Right? And let me share my screen. We just mentioned this book not too long ago.
You want Johnson's book?
No. The whitewashing of Christianity, right? The hidden past, a hurtful present, and a hopeful future by Jerome Gay Jr. He definitely speaks on this, But again, you want to see what he's trying to infer. He's giving people these mental alley-oops so that in your own brain, you start making these correlations that, well, white Jesus equates to white people, which equates to what Christianity actually is. Right. This is what he wants you to come away with when he says this statement.
Right.
But in Jerome's book, in order to properly present the gospel and the Christian faith accurately, it must be understood that Christianity is not the cultural property of any single racial or ethnic group. On the contrary, it has always existed as a chosen nation comprised of every nation, tribe, and tongue. So even though white Jesus has been from time to time used as a weapon for the marginalized Black and brown indigenous populations, it does not mean that that is exactly what Christianity is. It is not that. Has it been used in a perverse fashion? Absolutely.
Sure.
And as believers, we have to rail against any perversion of the actual Christian faith.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what Jerome is talking about in this book, and that's what we need to talk about as believers. When we see someone using our belief in a derogatory and oppressive fashion, we are the first people that should speak up on that. Not anyone else. It should be the Christian to say, hey, this guy who says he's a Christian, that's not of Christ. We're the first ones to say that. No one else. We should be the first people to check anyone that does anything that's the antithesis of stepping in the spirit of Christ.
Sure.
Yeah. So bro.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely want, we want to be fair, and actually I don't have a whole lot to say on this, but we want to be even-handed and objective as best we can. And so I had the same thing, man. Just
great minds
think alike. But the reality is, sometimes, and this is just something to think about. Sometimes you can agree with a conclusion or aspects of a conclusion and still have problems with how somebody got to the conclusion. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like back in the day. Now, I don't know how it is in school now because you got like calculators and it's like, they're smarter than, whatever, anyway, when I was in school, in math class, it wasn't enough for you to, give the right answer on the math test. Teachers wanted you to show your work. That's why we had to write in pencil, and they wanted to see each of the steps. They wanted you to show your work, because if you've got bad logic, if you had the process of getting to the answer wrong, then while you might have indeed, whether by cheating or just by luck or whatever, got the right answer, eventually that getting the process of how to get there wrong is going to trip you up somewhere along the line. So it's just as important for you to get the process of how you're working out that math problem right as it is for you to get the actual right answer. So it is the case also when it comes to logic and argumentation. Sometimes you can come to a conclusion that I might be sympathetic to or maybe in complete agreement with. So I do in fact think it's the case. And we keep harping it up, but as Pastor Jerome Gay mentions in his book, The Whitewashing of Christianity, I do think it is the case that Eurocentric misrepresentation of Christianity and its central figures, I do think there's a problem. And I do think that we need to be intentional about just totally getting rid of this Eurocentric mythical representation of Christianity and just present the truth. I'm saying, like, that's what we need. We need to be people of truth. So whether it be Jesus or whatever other figures in the Bible, as much as we can, represent them in terms of how they actually were, I feel that we ought to do that, because God, he was incarnate in a particular way, and I think we ought to respect that. And anyway, so I can agree on some level with where Umar Johnson is getting there. Yet and still, in terms of how he got to the conclusion, that's going to be problem. That's still a problem for me, because you still see some missteps in logic. So I'll be honest, like, I come from a mental health background by trade. I'm a social worker. I understand that Umar Johnson, in some sense or another, I know he's like a school psychologist or something like that. And so he's got that mental health background. So I get where he's trying to go when it comes to, he says that the brain is an associating organism. I think he meant organ, but I understand what the angle that he's trying to take, but I think what you see there is an overreach. You know what I'm saying? It is true that the brain associates things. That's true. It's also true that for those people who are visual, you do tend to absorb information in pictures to some regard. That's also true. However, to substantiate the idea that there's this broad, I guess, kind of overarching effect of white Jesus to where it's associated with white supremacy to the degree that that any given black person cannot, get past that in order to buck against white supremacy, oppression, so on and so forth. That's an overreach. I would need to see some studies that would show that has been the case, particularly among African Americans. And if you can't show me studies where what he's describing is impacting African people to that extent, then at best he's got is conjecture. You know what I'm saying? But he has, he doesn't have the clinical study to suggest that what he's describing, you know what I'm saying, is impactful to the degree that he says it is. Now, I'm going to couple that with this. Not only would he have to show that there's studies that support that the association effect that he's talking about indeed has impacted us to that degree, I actually think there are examples in our history that undermine this theory, because there really is no upheaval of enslaved persons in human history that was more successful than Toussaint Louverture, down there in Haiti. It's literally like the greatest slave uprising of all time. I guess going back to like Spartacus or something like that. You know what I mean? And so, with that being said, Toussaint Louverture was a professing Catholic. I'm saying actually in their original, like once they shed off French dictatorship or colonization, their first constitution established Catholicism as the national religion, and they actually relegated practice of like Vodun and other systems to private practice. You couldn't do that publicly, right? Now, obviously, eventually Toussaint Louverture was chased out of town basically, and clearly they've overturned that. Nevertheless, he himself was a professing Catholic, so whether it be a Toussaint Louverture bucking against oppression, a Gabriel Prosser, a Nat Turner, whether it be the swaths of Frederick Douglass or so many freedom fighters, Henry Harding Garnett, civil rights activists like Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dr. Martin Luther King. all of these people coming from the Christian tradition, I'm saying, fighting against white supremacy, right? As a matter of fact, I can't think of any worldview that has more African descendant representatives in the freedom movements here in the West than Christianity, right? So if we've been the most active against white supremacy compared to other, religious groups, right? And then that kind of undermines this notion that somehow white Jesus has been so crippling that to subscribe to Christianity, you will not be able to buck against, white supremacy. That's obviously not the case, because it hasn't been the case since we've been here. We've had people who profess Christ and have been bucking against white supremacy since we got here. You know what I'm saying? So clearly that's not true. You know what I mean? So anyway, I just want to throw that out there.
No, that's well done as always, sir. That's why you're here. That's why you're here, to do what you do. So let's keep going with the dismantling.
Yes, sir. I think actually we're making good time.
What we find is that in this story that came out of Kemet, after Set reconstituted the body of her husband Asar, the spirit of Asar came and impregnated his virgin wife, Aset. And then 9 months later, the virgin Aset gave birth to her son, Heru. And Heru was born 4,000 years ago on December the 25th.
You can stop it. You can stop it.
Man,
I love the music, like the dramatic pause, like
right. That's good directing. That's good directing. Yeah.
It is, but it's horrible scholarship, right? Because you would think that people who are so pro-Kemetic would really look at the sources, right? But anyway, you know what I'm about to do.
Of course.
So he says, in this story that came out of Kemet, Aset reconstituted the body of her husband Asar. The spirit of Asar came and impregnated the virgin wife. And then 9 months later, the virgin Aset gave birth to her son Heru, and Heru was born 4,000 years ago. When? December 25th. Right? So, of course, the Roman words it's Isis, Osiris,
and Horus,
right? And they give birth to Horus, right? So, and they make this comparison, right? That Jesus comes from Horus, and I just recently did a video about this. So, when anyone comes to you and says that Jesus comes from Horus, the first question you should ask is, well, which one? Because there's actually a whole bunch of different iterations of Horus. You have the vengeful Horus, you have Horus the Elder, you have Horus of the Horizon, and you have Horus the Child. Now, of course, Horus the Child is the best fit if you're trying to make this correlation. But even with Horus the Child, you have to ask, well, which one? Because there's at least 4 different child deities that go by the name of Horus. So what you have here is a Frankenstein monster of Horuses that's patchworked to try to make an attempt of a comparison with Jesus, right?
It's kind of like what Oprah used to do. You get a horse, and you get a horse, and you get a horse. Everybody gets a horse.
Everyone gets one.
Right.
So, and of course, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but one of the things that, like, you heard him say, right, that she was spiritually impregnated by Osiris, right? Well, we're gonna find out if that's what Isis says occurred. So,
well, she would know, I would think.
She would know. Right? You got to go to the source, right?
Right.
And speaking of source, here's a primary source for you. This is Coffin Text, spell 148, The Conception of Horus. These texts are intended to provide for the successful transition to the afterlife of a deceased Egyptian. The purpose of this text is stated in the title, to allow the deceased to become a falcon. The Egyptians believed that the dead could transform themselves into any number of forms necessary to escape enemies in the afterworld and ascend to the world of the gods. Right? So we're going to read to you the translation of this portion of the Coffin Text. This is Aset speaking. This is Isis. This is what they're saying she is saying. Okay? Ho, gods, I am Isis, the sister of Osiris. That's already problematic, right? Who wept on account of the father of the gods, Osiris, who parted the slaughter of the 2 lands. His semen is inside my body.
Uh-oh.
His semen is inside my body. I have knitted the form of a god in the egg as my son, foremost of the Ened, who will rule this land. He will inherit Geb, who will speak for his father, who will slay Seth, the enemy of his father, Osiris. Come, O gods, may you provide his protection within my uterus. Know in your hearts that his God who is in his egg is your Lord, the blue-haired one, the form of the Lord of the gods, who are great and beautiful, adorned with 2 plumes of laspi lazuli. This is from Ancient Egypt, Facts and Fictions by Stephen E. Thompson. I thought it was a virgin birth. I thought it was the spirit. That's not what the goddess is saying.
Nah, she ain't. There's not no spiritual semen on me.
She got knocked up.
She got right.
She got knocked up.
Right.
Don't take my word. Take hers. This is supposed to be a quote from her. She's saying, I got the semen. I got it.
Right.
I mean, and then of course, right?
This is their text. I mean, this is from their tradition. This is from their tradition.
Primary source. And then December 25th. That's nowhere in the Bible.
Yeah, it's nowhere. It's like nowhere.
You know what I mean?
Now here's the thing. I felt some kind of way, when I watched this as we were preparing, because you know where I'm about to go with this. So recently, when I was on Garfield's channel, I mentioned how this December 25th stuff, I referred to it as it's that zeitgeist kind of stuff. Now, I think Shaka Atmos, who I was doing the dialogue with, got caught up in the fact that I used the term zeitgeist. It's like, oh, it's not just from zeitgeist. But clearly, I was using zeitgeist as a pejorative. I'm saying, like, the category of claims are, I'm associating zeitgeist, with, pseudo scholarship. I'm saying I'm using it as a pejorative. Anyway, right. He goes on this whole rant about, no real scholar or nobody who's informed in the Kemetic tradition would ever say that Jesus was born on December 25th and Horus was born December 25th, whatever he said. And he just acted like I was just pulling this out of my behind. Like, I was just making it up that they claim this. I mean, and here you have like one of his OGs, right? You know what I'm saying? Or at least OG in the Kemetic movement of today, making this claim about December 25th. Right. So I'm not making this stuff up. I didn't bring it up a couple weeks ago because I just felt like bringing it up. Like, no, this is the kind of stuff that we get from Hidden Colors and the memes and so on and so forth. And I mean, I felt like playing that clip where he was just going off about it. He said, "Oh, you'll never see me saying something like that." When he has a whole video where at the conclusion of the video, Shaka Atmos says that Horus was born on the winter solstice, which during that time was December 25th. Like, he literally says that. He's like, "Yo, I'll give you $100," which I think he
owes us $50 a piece.
Yeah, we got to get 50 a piece. We definitely got to get 50 a piece. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, I wasn't tripping when I said this. I mean, clearly these are the kind of claims that they make. Pseudo scholarship or not, if they want to, it just is what it is.
And again, don't come at me and Adam. Come at your goddess,
right?
Because your goddess doesn't go with Anthony Crowder. She disagrees.
Right?
She disagrees. All right. So, all right, let's keep it going.
That's it.
So in 325, it was decided that Jesus Christ would be a son of God. In 325, it was decided that Jesus Christ would be born in the manger in Bethlehem. Up until the Nicene Council, most people believe that Jesus Christ was born in a cave in Ethiopia, even in Ethiopia till today.
Stop it.
Man, these guys be lying, bro. I'm sorry, man.
That's a whole lie, bro. Like that can't, come on. No one, what?
Where is he? I do have a slide. Did you have something you want to go with that first? Or did
I got something for this.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
So again,
these guys be lying, bro.
So in 325, it was decided that Jesus Christ would be the Son of God. At 325, it was decided Jesus Christ would be born. It was decided then that he would be born in the manger in Bethlehem. Up until then, the Nicene Council, most people believe that Jesus Christ was born in a cave in Ethiopia. Even the Ethiopians still today. As if we don't have people that were there to tell us what happened at the council. In The Search for the Christian Doctrine of God, the Arian Controversy by R.P.C. Hansen, Arius is notable primarily because of his role in the Arian Controversy, a great 4th century theological conflict that led to the calling of the First Ecumenical Council of the Church. This controversy centered upon the nature of the Son of God and his precise relationship to God the Father. Before the Council of Nicaea, the Christian world knew several competing Christological ideas. Church authorities condemned some of these ideas, but did not put forth a uniform formula. The Nicene formula was rapidly concluded solution to the general Christological debate. This what was being debated, not whether or not he was born in the cave and now let's switch it up and make it Bethlehem. No. We know actually what, like, we have eyewitness testimony of what happened at the place.
We know. It's not a mystery. Matter of fact, I don't know if you remember, we actually did a whole video on this.
Yes.
Where
Professor Smalls and Zion.
That's right. That's what it was. I was trying to figure out what video that was, but you're right. It was Professor Smalls and Zion Lex. And we combed through that. We were showing people that, and people can go back and look at that video. We were actually showing the text, you know what I'm saying, and the first-hand accounts, or excuse me, the testimony that we have from ancient documents as to what actually went down at the Council of Nicaea. Like, there's really no reason, for there to be any confusion about that. You know what I'm saying? That being said, your boy, man, Umar be wilding, bro. Umar is wilding.
But again, this launched 1,000,000,001 memes.
1,000,000,001, bro.
This documentary.
This man said most believed that he was born in a cave in Ethiopia. I'm like seriously, dude? 325 AD? I mean, so again, actually, I can just kind of keep this simple because I feel like you covered it adequately. Where's the evidence for these claims? What documents, and by documents, I mean like primary, secondary sources, can Umar Johnson produced that demonstrates that prior to 320, or I'll just say that at 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea, or 325 AD, whatever, however he wants to characterize that, it was decided Jesus would be the Son of God, born in a manger in Bethlehem, and that prior to that, most believed that he is born in a cave in Ethiopia. Where's the evidence? That's what I want to know. You know what I'm saying? Now, the fact of the matter is, we have textual evidence. I'm saying we have fragments, and we have fragments of the New Testament text, including the Gospels, and we have quotations from the New Testament text from the early church fathers prior to 325 AD, mind you. I'm saying to such an extent that we can literally reconstruct the entirety of the New Testament, right, from these fragments and quotations between the years where I'll just say between the 1st century and 325 AD. That's not hard to do. We can do that. And when you think about he claims that all these things were made up at 325 AD, but we have the text though. We have the text in existence. I'm saying that demonstrate that these things were held to prior to 325 AD. And when he says that most believe that he was born in a cave in Ethiopia, well, look, if you have the Gospels from, let's say, by the end of the 1st century on up to 325 AD, if you have, let's say, about 2.5 centuries of the Gospels being in existence, right? Okay. When you think about how the Bible was canonized, and I'll just be real quick about it. Again, I would really recommend F.F. Bruce's work on the canon of Scripture. But when you think about how the Bible was canonized, meaning you have the different books of the Bible that are written by these different authors brought together into one volume that's considered to be the authoritative word of God, if you will, the standard by which Christian doctrine and practice is measured. I'm saying when you think about that process, the New Testament text, one of the criteria, one of the measuring sticks that they use to include them in the canon was whether or not a work was widely circulated in the early church. You know what I'm saying? So the Gospels being widely circulated in the early church, that was a mark in their favor, you know what I'm saying, in terms of being included in the canon. So this idea that most people believe that he was born in a cave in Ethiopia, well, the widely circulated narrative in the church, right, from the earliest documents going back to the 1st century, recording narrative wherein Jesus is not born in Ethiopia in a cave, but he was born in a manger in Bethlehem. We have that text. I'm saying, we have the textual evidence, and we know that it was canonized in part because it was widely circulated. And mind you, it was written either by an apostle or an associate of an apostle. So not only do we have authority of those who were present or new people who were present when those first oral histories were first scripted, but in addition, we have the textual evidence and wide circulation of the Bethlehem narrative. So the idea that most believe that he was born in a cave in Ethiopia, that's obviously false. Unless he can provide some evidence, there's no good reason why we should take him at his word on that.
Right.
So, yeah.
And again, we had people who were in the room during the meeting who told us what actually occurred. Right. We don't have to guess. We don't have to guess. We have multiple witnesses in the room have written the account of the meeting.
Yeah.
Multiple. So this grasping for straws makes absolutely no sense when we actually have the people who were in the room who wrote what went down. I'm sorry.
It's man, come on, man. It's just too late in the game for people to still be putting this garbage out, man. I'm sorry.
It's crazy. All right, let's keep it going.
Was not celebrated in
Rewind it a little
December
bit.
25th. Christmas was not celebrated in December 25th. For hundreds of years, it was celebrated in August. They moved it to December 25th because that's the Egyptian celebration of the birth of the son of the sun. Talking about Heru and Asaf.
All right, and like what Adam said earlier, we've dealt with this claim with Shaka, and he didn't make the claim, right, that Heru was born December 20th. He actually made a whole video. We made a whole response to the video. And again, he owes us $100. But so right?
Because he claims that no, I guess, well-versed or knowledgeable individual from the Kemetic tradition would ever make the claim that Horus was born on December 25th. Yet he's got two of his OGs.
Right. Now you got two. You got two.
You got two of his OGs that have made that claim. So either he's going to say that they're not knowledgeable and somehow distance himself from them, or he's going to have to recant his statement.
So is it 100 per OG? Is that what we're doing? So he owes us $300, right?
Yeah, it should be 300. Yeah.
Anyway, so he says Christmas was not celebrated on December 25th for hundreds of years. It was celebrated in August. They moved it to December 25th because that's the Egyptian celebration of the birth of the sun, talking about Heru. Now, within the church, there was some argument about when would be the best time to celebrate the birth of Christ. This is true, but it had nothing to do with Egypt. And why do I say that? Well, for that, I'm going to call in special teams.
All right.
And I'm going to share, actually, this is part of the video that me and Adam did. I'm going to share a correspondence that I had with my good friend, Dr. David Folk, who just happens to be an Egyptologist. So I figured, let me go to somebody who's an expert in this field about this situation. So I say, question, what corresponding months did the epigomenal days in ancient Egypt occur? You know, the birthday of the gods. And what is the earliest source for these days? He says the earliest source for those days in the temple calendar of Nesurara dynasty, the 5th dynasty, they are typically the last 5 days of the year, a year here being defined as 365 days. What month do the 5 epigomenal days occur in? They don't. Okay, I understand that the Roman calendar did not follow the Egyptian one, but if we were to compare the two, when would these 5 days land on the Julian calendar? He says that's an apples and oranges question. The reason is because the Julian calendar was 365 and a quarter days, while the Egyptian calendar was 360. The 5 additional days of the calendar were dispersed across the civil months. Moreover, the two calendars were never in sync because the Roman calendar used intercalation. Oops, that should be the Egyptian calendar used 365 days, too early in the morning for me. So I'm like, okay, explain. The calendar is 12 months of 30 days plus 5 epigomenal days. And I say, so the 5 days don't fall on any season then, correct? So when you start talking about seasons, things start getting tricky. The 5 days occur after the end of the 12th month, last month of the season of Shemu, harvest, and before the first day of the first month of the season, Akhet, inundation. The actual seasons could vary because it rotated over the calendar in a 1460-year cycle. So I say, would Horus be considered born during the winter solstice according to the Egyptian calendar? Not really. The Egyptians did not have a winter solstice. As I said, the calendar rotated. And I said, can I quote you for a video I'm working on? He said, I suppose, let's just say for clarity, the Egyptian calendar did not follow the same month or order as the Gregorian calendar. Cool. So it's a rolling pattern between these two calendars that they had. They had the ritual calendar and the civil calendar, and they didn't sync ever. So this idea that it was modeled after the Kemetic calendar, how?
Yeah, so I've got to correct something I've said before, because as I've understood it, that the epigomenal days were somewhere like at the end of summer, basically. But actually, it's not really true. They rotated over the course of 1460 years to where they could be at different spots,
right,
depending on the year. Very interesting. Right. Very interesting. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So,
but nevertheless, the idea that the key is on the second of those epigomenal days. I believe it was that Horus was celebrated. The birth of Horus was celebrated. So really, wherever those days ended up on the calendar, there's no reason to think that it was December 25th. It shifted every year. Right. Every year. You know what I'm saying? So this whole association, and like you said earlier, obviously Jesus was not born on December 25th in terms of actual orthodoxy. That's just, it's a tradition.
Right. And his date is not mentioned in the text anyway.
It's not in the text. There's no theological or historical commitment that Christians have to the date December 25th whatsoever. Right. Regardless of whatever you say about December 25th, it doesn't undercut Christianity not one bit, because we're not committed to that date theologically or historically in terms of any sort of significance.
That was an in-house discussion within Christendom at the time. Right. That was it.
Now, but see, I meant to say this earlier too, but one of the things I think these guys play on is, quite frankly, Christian ignorance. You know what I'm saying? There are certain things about our own worldview that we don't know in terms of the average Christian. And so sometimes what they'll do is they'll state something that either may seem true, or for example, like when Anthony DeBrowder said something about Jesus' name was Yeshua. I'm saying, if you don't know that, then you can be like, okay, well, if that's true, then everything else he says must have some merit, because now he's giving me something that's true. So that's like some credibility. But the reality is, what they do is they play on our lack of knowledge of our own worldview give you a nugget of something that may or may not be true, and then we assign to them credibility that they then use to, usher in all sorts of
composition fallacy. The composition fallacy.
Oh, good. Yeah.
If this is true, therefore everything else following that must also be true.
Yeah. Good.
Right.
Yep.
It's not,
there you go.
So.
Can't say it any better. Yeah.
All right. So let's keep it going.
Talking about Heru and Asa.
The image that we have of Santa Claus is the rosy-cheeked European jolly guy, and that image was created sometime in the early 1800s. But the real Santa Claus was a man by the name of St. Nicholas. And when I do research about St. Nicholas, the real St. Nicholas, the further back I go, the blacker St. Nicholas gets. And when you look at pictures and portraits of St. Nicholas in museums in Europe, St. Nicholas is totally black. And there's a museum in Italy that has an old painting of St. Nicholas, and he has like dark skin, woolly hair. So people have to realize that the Santa Claus that we know and love today is based on a black saint from Europe.
Yeah, I got no slides for that.
I got one.
Like these portraits don't age. You know what I mean? It's like, and
how would you know that was the original painting? First of all, they're saying like, how do you know that?
Is he right? Is he an expert in the field of ancient paintings? I mean, how does
right.
he?
I mean, it certainly could have been one before that just isn't extant. But anyway, just real simple slide right here.
All right, let's go.
Tariq Nasheed's claims here are irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant.
No one cares.
Who cares,
no
bro?
One cares here,
nobody cares. That's all I got to say. I don't care. That picture in the middle was Esther Roll from Good Times, dressed up as Santa Claus. I don't care if you think of if she looks like Santa Claus or the white dude on the left. I don't care if you think the Santa Claus looks like Tariq Nasheed. I don't even care, man. It matters not one bit with respect to Christianity. Like, not anything at all in Christianity is hinges upon the complexion of St. Nicholas. Now, and the fact of the matter is, he probably was a melanated person, probably of some sort. You know, I think he was like Middle Eastern or something like that. You know, I'm not even gonna go further than that, because the bottom line is, we got to watch out for claims that are leveraged against Christianity. But when you really think about it, it's just irrelevant. It has no relevance whatsoever.
Right. Red herring.
Total red herring. Oh, yeah, you go. That's another 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't ready for that. He's like, irrelevant. All right.
Here we go again.
The Council of Nicaea was an effort by Constantine to control the people through military and through religion. Whoever can control your concept of God has a weapon more powerful than any physical weapon, than any sword, any gun, any atomic weapon. Whoever controls how you relate to the unseen presence of God will not only control you, but can control your children and your children's children. So it was at the Council of Nicaea that the Constantine, this emperor, needed to find a way to consolidate his power, because the people that he conquered in various parts of the world had different religions, different ideologies. And it was at Nicaea where he brought together these theologians, these scholars, if you will, to hammer out one uniform theology that everyone would follow.
And if Constantine could convince people to take Jesus as God on earth and change that he was a human being, then they could take over the control of the Catholic Church and make one. So they invited. And one of the priests was an African known as Arius. Bishop Arius. There's a book called Blacks Who Died for Jesus by Mark Hyman. Gives the story of Arius. Arius now gets word that Constantine knows Arius is coming to dispute this. Because he's saying, how are you going to tell people this? Nobody's going to believe that story. That Immaculate Conception? Come on, you know that's written on the walls of Egypt. That's a mythology, that's an analogy. You're not supposed to believe that story. That's a nice story to live by, that each and every one of us has Jesus within us and every birth is an Immaculate Conception. But there was no one boy born as the Son of God to freak. Come on, you can't. Constantine said, look, Come on over here, Nicaea, I'm going to talk to you. He found out that he was going to be assassinated. So he fled into Europe with his followers. Arius and his followers became known as the Arians. Wouldn't Hitler have a heart attack if he knew who the real Arians were? They were a bunch of black folk.
Everybody. Stop it there. Man, that was bad.
Yeah,
that was bad.
That was horrible, bro.
That was so bad.
Oh, man.
All right, let's get to it. Let's get to chopping this fable.
Let's get to chopping this fable.
All right, so he says, if Constantine could convince people to take Jesus as God on earth and change that he was a human being, then they could take over the control of the Catholic Church and make one or they invented, and one of the priests was an African known as Arius, Bishop Arius. There's a book called Blacks Who Died for Jesus by Mark Hyman. Gives a story of Arius, how he gets the word that Constantine knows Arius is coming to dispute this, because he's saying how you want to tell people. They said nobody's going to believe that story, that the Immaculate Conception, come on now, that's written on the walls of Egypt. All right. So as we've already shown, it is not written on the walls of Egypt. There is no virgin birth. Again, I'm not saying that. The goddess Isis is saying there's no virgin birth. Right? But then he says it's an analogy. Well, again, the indigenous people of Kemet didn't believe in analogous interpretations of their belief system. Plutarch did, though. And that's who they gained the information from. This white man who couldn't read the metal letter, who fancied himself as a Kemetic priest when he was really nothing more than a cosplayer, fronting. And this is where they all get the information from, is from Plutarch, right? So again, it's not written on the walls. And even if it was written on the walls, it's not an analogy, because they really believed in what was written in the walls. So, again, the first and then he talks about the Immaculate Conception, right? The first Council of Nicaea was a council of Christian bishops convened in the Byzantine city of Nicaea by the Roman Emperor Constantine in AD 325. The first move towards describing Mary's conception as immaculate comes in the 11th century. This is from the Catholic Encyclopedia.
Come on, bro.
Come on. Really? This is what we're doing? This is what we're doing?
Apparently it is. Apparently this is what we're doing.
It's come on. Let's get our timeline straight.
It's terrible, man. It's terrible, dog.
So get ahead, bro.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of harping what you're saying. Here's the thing. Remember I was talking about earlier how I think there's
my bad. I still got
no, do you think?
I got to deal with this. His followers Arius, and his followers became known as Arians. Wouldn't Hitler have a heart attack if he knew who the real Arians were? They were a bunch of black folk. Again with the parallel mania, right? So a homophone is a noun, each of two or more words having the same pronunciation but different meanings, origins, or spelling. For example, new and new. Right? Each of a set of symbols denoted the same sound or group of sounds. So he hears Aryan, and then he starts thinking about the Aryan race. Well, since both these words are pronounced the same way, they must be from the same origin. There must be a one-to-one correlation. And just to be clear, the term Aryan is derived from the name Arius. It was not what the followers of Arius' teachings called themselves, but rather a term used by outsiders. And the term Aryan, Aryan, is Indo-European or relating to a hypothetical ethnic type illustrated by or descended from early speakers of Indo-European languages. So the word Aryan, spelled Aryan, is a people group, whereas Aryan, Arian, is a name of outsiders gave to followers of Arius. Homophone, parallel mania.
That's embarrassing, bro.
Sloppy, very sloppy.
That's beyond sloppy. I mean, at that point, I just say at some point you have to ask, like, where's the intersection between just misinformation and just flat out deception? You know what I'm saying? Like, at some point, it's hard to believe that this dude really believes this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. Maybe he read it in some other pseudo work. You know what I'm saying? He's just regurgitating it. I don't know. But I want to say this. Excuse me. that again, I think in the effort to uplift and uphold Black dignity, as they're launching this tirade against Christianity and so on, what they end up doing is actually undermining Black dignity and contributions. Like they're supposed to be talking about hidden colors, right? They're supposed to be exposing the hidden history of Africans and so forth. Now, he's just totally fabricated. I'll just say totally misrepresented or fabricated. He said the council.
Snyder cut.
The Snyder, right? He's giving us the Snyder cut of the Council of Nicaea. Now, the fact of the matter is, it is true that Constantine was interested in there being a consensus among the main theologians at the time with regard to a particular theological matter, but it's not because he was trying to perpetrate some idea of like the Son of God, being human for some sort of manipulative purpose. The reality is the church had been growing by that point. I'm saying it was such a social force. I'm saying it was such, so present in society that a large schism amongst the church would be antithetical to him trying to have a kingdom where there's peace and, people aren't beefing. So it was it would be like, let's say if you have like the Republican Party, is having some super major beef to the point where they, might be fighting each other or something like that. You know what I mean? If you're the president, you want to have peace in your kingdom, it might behoove you to, facilitate peace among Republicans. It's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? It's not that you're trying to control per se, is that you just don't want these people over here to be beefing because you want cats to chill out in your kingdom. It's really that simple. Now, with that being said, on Constantine's side, those would be his motivations. That being said, from the church's standpoint, you have a different set of events that give rise to the Council of Nicaea, and this is where we get into the African contributions part. Because before you have the Council of Nicaea, which would have been like the largest or the first and largest ecumenical council. I'm saying where you're getting bishops from all over, the Roman Empire and so forth. You had a provincial council in Alexandria, Egypt. I'm saying which would have been a smaller council where they first addressed the issue that would become the centerpiece of dialogue at the Council of Nicaea. Okay, so what you have is Bishop Arius, indeed, was a clergy in Alexandria, Egypt. And at the time, Alexandria, Egypt was overseen from a clergy standpoint by Bishop Alexander, right? And you also have a young theologian up and coming by the name of Athanasius. Now, Arius brings to the table, not that Jesus was a human, right? That's not what he's bringing to the table. Actually, what he was bringing to the table is that Jesus was a created, yet in some sense celestial being. I'm saying he believed that Jesus was a created being, and that's what he was bringing to the table. Not that he was just straight up human. So that's, first of all, his whole notion about Arius was trying to say, oh no, he just he wasn't the son, he was a human being. Well, no, that's not what Arius was bringing to the table, and we know that because we actually have letters between Athanasius refuting Arius and laying out the points of disagreement that they have, where he talks about what it is.
We got the letters, fam.
We kept the files.
Kept the file.
We kept the files. I'm saying, and if people want to, a direct quote, we can go to again that video where we broke down the dialogue between Zion Lex and Professor Smalls, because I actually read from the text. I have it here in the next room. But yeah, actually read from the text and you can see it there. But nevertheless, the issue, the problem at hand was that Arius was saying that Jesus was a created being, and there were other clergy like Bishop Alexander and Athanasius were saying, well, no, he's not. And they tried to hash this out at the Alexandrian Provincial Council. Arius was defeated at that council and given the boot. And so then he begins to, he had to go somewhere else. So he starts teaching his stuff in other areas of the Roman Empire. And his teaching was gaining prominence. I'm saying there was a lot of controversy on how to properly understand the divinity of Christ. And that became such a controversy that then they had to convene the larger or more prominent council, i.e. the Council of Nicaea. So as he's trying, as Booker T. Coleman is just, or Cabo, what have you, and what's his name before him? I think Browder was in there as well. As they're giving this misrepresentation or incomplete representation and misrepresentation, actually, of how the Council of Nicaea came to be, they're leaving out the African influence, because before you have the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, you have the Alexandrian Provincial Council, I'm saying, with Arius and these other bishops who were from Alexandria. Now, what's interesting about that, why would they be having such a strong theological presence and debate in Alexandria? because Alexandria was one of the main outposts for Christianity at that time, alongside, obviously Jerusalem, Antioch, you know what I'm saying? And I don't know why I'm missing something about, I want to say Rome or something like that. But nevertheless, you know what I'm saying? Alexandria was right there as a theological hub, right? So that's why this whole debate would have been taken care of, going on there. As a matter of fact, you have the Alexandria Catechetical School, right, which was the first theological school, the first Christian seminary established anywhere on the planet, was established right there in Alexandria, Egypt. It was a theological hub, right? So he's leaving all that kind of stuff out. You have this African presence and contribution that leads to, probably the most pivotal, council in church history. I'm saying between that and Constantinople, the Nicene Constantinople meetings or whatever. But it's precipitated. The 325 is precipitated by this thing that was going on amongst theologians in Africa. So he's trying to big up Africa, and yet leaving out one of our greatest contributions. You know what I'm saying? So it's just nonsense, man, and it's a misrepresentation. It's nonsense.
And then to piggyback off the African influence, so you got Constantinius, who does subscribe to Arianism and tries to enforce Arianism to the African believers. And it's the Africans that are like, we ain't trying to do that. We Orthodox. And they fought against Constantinius, and they did not accept Arianism. It was the Africans that held down Orthodoxy.
That's a great point. No, but and you're right. I'm glad you said that, because he does paint this picture as if Constantine is like, kind of giving Arius the Godfather treatment, like, yo, you better line up or else, kind of a thing. But in actuality, even though Orthodoxy won out at the initial Council of Nicaea, it is the case that following that, you do have a period of, I want to say about 25 years at least, you know what I'm saying, after the Council of Nicaea, where Arianism actually it still holds sway and is running things, basically. Arius' perspective is still holding weight theologically, and for that reason, Athanasius actually has to flee into hiding for a while. I'm saying Athanasius being, one of the main opponents to Arius at the Council of Nicaea, he actually had to flee into hiding for a period after the Council of Nicaea. You know what I'm saying? Because Arianism, as in the actual Arius, I'm saying not the Nazis, not the Nazis. Yeah, Arianism was actually, holding the power. I'm saying again after the Council of Nicaea. Now the thing about it is, during that period where you have, you have the Council of Nicaea where Orthodoxy wins out, then you have this period where you have a resurgence of Arian's teachings, during which Athanasius has to dip out for a while. And then, Athanasius comes back later on. During that resurgence, you know what I'm saying, Constantine is still running things, right? So for a portion of his reign, he still has Arianism, running amok. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't actually get baptized until his deathbed. Right. And so it wasn't, and I think he got baptized by an Arian priest, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm gonna have to go research that. Y'all hold me accountable to check that. But I'm pretty sure he got baptized, or his conversion was overseen by an Arian priest. Which, given the fact that later on Orthodoxy comes back and Athanasius and so forth after that, and thankfully holds it down from then on. What's his name? Constantine would have been considered a heretic, but he was riding with Arius for at least that portion of time where it was making a resurgence.
Right. And again, Constantinius was trying to enforce that joint. The African was like, nope, not here, buddy.
Right.
That's not flying here.
So that's that dynamic that he painted between Arius and Constantine being enemies like that, if you will. That's just not historically accurate. I'm saying that's not what happened.
Yeah. Right. Good stuff, man. Let's keep it going.
Yes, sir.
Became known as the Aryans. Wouldn't Hitler have a heart attack if he knew who the real Aryans were? They were a bunch of black folk.
Everybody who was worshiping Isis and dealing with mostly a Kemetic religious philosophy, they said, we can't do this. This is ridiculous. This reminds me, there's no man called Jesus Christ. We ain't never heard of him. Well, Jesus Christ will take Hesus, which was the sun god in the west, and we'll take Christos, which was the sun god in the east, and we'll put them together. We'll have a name. And so what did he do? A man named Apollonius of Tyana, at that time, who had studied philosophy in Kemet, was teaching. He was a healer, working miracles. he was a hero at that time. So he became the template for Jesus Christ.
All right, you can stop it there. So he doesn't make the connection with the other three people. Like there's two people he talks about before Apollonius. And I don't think he ever goes into how he's like those two. Like he doesn't put it together. He just throws it out there.
I don't know.
He throws it out there so that you in your mind that, oh, there must be some kind of connection. But he never even makes the connection. He's hoping you make the connection for him, first of all, right? But anyway, Jesus Christ will take Hes, which was the sun god in the west, and we'll take Christos, which was the sun god. We'll put them together and we'll have a name so that what we did was a man named Apollonius of Tyana at that time who had studied philosophy and Kemet was teaching. He was a healer working on miracles. He was a hero. And that at that time, he became the template for Jesus. He never mentions how Hes and Christos somehow combine to form Voltron, aka like he doesn't tell us, right? But let's talk about Apollonius, right? Since he's the template, right? Cool. The life of Apollonius of Tyana was written no earlier than 217 AD. This is over 1,000 years after Apollonius lived.
100. You have 100 on here.
100. Oh, it's 200. It's 200?
You said it's over 1,000 years after.
I said, no, it's 100.
Yeah, 100.
Oh, I said 1,000, my bad. 100 years after Apollonius lived. Twice as long as the time between the life of Jesus. And the latest proposed date for the first gospel writing 75 AD, and 4 times longer than the earliest proposed time, 50 AD. So from a textual criticism perspective, it's already a reach.
It's late, man. Super late.
It's super late, right? Read Richard's time once again. Right? The author Philostratus was born around 172 AD. This means that whereas there were still people alive when the Gospels were written who could confirm or deny the historicity, in the case of Apollonius, everyone who knew him was long dead and buried. This makes a substantial difference when comparing the texts.
Sure.
Right? The life is rooted in a problematic source. Philostratus' source, the Diary of Damis, is full of historical anachronisms and gross geographical errors. Elsewhere, Philostratus makes use of imaginary official letters, inscriptions, decrees, and edicts. So he's straight fabricating.
He's straight lying.
So let's talk about the alleged similarities. Let's talk about some high points of Apollonius, and you tell me if this sounds just like Jesus.
That's a weird looking dude, man, already.
If someone says that the life of Apollonius sounds like one of the New Testament Gospels, perhaps they need to read both again. Consider these selections from the life. Apollonius specifically condemns the practice of taking hot baths.
Oh,
sounds like Jesus so far?
Nah, bro.
He and his party encounter a hobgoblin, which they chase away by calling it names. That's in the book of John, right? It's somewhere in the... No,
I'm still stuck on the hot baths part, man. I mean, let's just think about it, right? If this dude had disciples, I don't know if he did, maybe he didn't. If these dudes is walking around in the hot heat of wherever they're from, not taking baths, man. Come on, dog. Well, he said hot baths. Maybe they're taking cold baths.
Perhaps. Apollonius states that captive elephants cry and mourn at night when men are not watching.
What?
Which is interesting because he's a man. How does he know? But when men come around, they stop crying because they are ashamed. This comes as part of a very long section devoted to elephants, which was taken from Juba's history of Libya.
Time out, bro. Fam, that claim right there about the crying elephants has to be the most meaningless, theological claim or whatever teaching or whatever in any in any spiritual work or whatever. It has to be. Who cares, bro?
We have to care because this is the template in which we get Jesus, bro.
Why are we if you're reading this, right, and you get to the elephant part, you're why are we talking about this again? What does the elephants have to do with
elephants mourning and crying in secret?
For what, bro?
Because they don't want the humans to find out because they'll be ashamed. How do you know they even feel shame? How do you? So Apollonius confronts a satyr and puts it to sleep by offering it wine. So he's getting Greco-Roman mythological creatures drunk.
and chasing off hobgoblins. Sounds just like Christ, bro.
I mean, I don't know if you the water into wine. If you want to try to still man the
Yeah, man, I don't even know.
How about this one? You're gonna like this one. During his trial, Apollonius causes the writing to disappear from the tablets of one of his accusers. That'd have been pretty dope for Jesus to do when he was on trial, right?
Oh man, these dudes.
Oh, that's it, man. So just like the Lord. Just like the Lord.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't even have a whole lot to say. I'll just share this briefly, but I'm gonna share this slide real quick. But this is what I was talking about. I kind of talked about it earlier, but Frankenstein historiography, bro. That's what we're dealing with. We just hodgepodging, piecing stuff together that don't fit, and just hoping that you're gonna ride with it. That's really all this comes down to. That's really all this comes down to. I mean, you already killed that claims out. I mean, but again, well, actually, I talked about this earlier, but when you're layering on different, when you're putting on different layers to your explanations, you know what I mean, and it just violates all sort of simplicity. I mean, there's no good reason to take these his explanation of the Jesus narrative seriously, man. That's just, but Phil Valentine, man, that's one of the OG. Yep. This is one of the OG. I don't want to call him a pseudo scholar because I feel like we've been doing pretty good so far. So I'm just not going to call him that. But honestly, even amongst the conscious community, I feel like a lot of people know that he be on some stuff. Like he really be wild. You know what I mean? So
yeah, they don't really rock with Phil like that anymore.
Nah. Really. He's the king of the okie doke. You know what I'm saying? That's just kind of how he is. So
he's not a pseudo scholar, but he's the king of the okie doke. Interesting, Adam. Right, I like that. I like that.
That's a little softer,
No, it's cool. It's cool. All right. Let's keep it going.
All right, here we go.
The first slave ship, the first ship that was used to bring Africans from the continent and transport them across the Americas was known as the good ship Jesus. And as Alex Haley said when he did his research for Roots, he said that traditionally, when Africans were loaded on the slave ships, captain in his log would see to it that the first two people loaded aboard those slave ships were a man and a woman, and they were recorded in the ship's log as Adam and Eve.
The African priests
were
always smarter than the Europeans.
Okay. Well, first of all, right, we've all heard of the good ship named Jesus, right? We've seen the memes. We've seen other people use this in their videos, right? Mm-hmm. So again, the inference that there's a connection they want you to make, right? Slavery is bad. Mm-hmm. Slave ships were vehicles that were used to transport kidnapped Africans to different places to use them as property, as actual tools, right? One of those ships that were part of that terrible and perverse trade happens to have the same name as Jesus. Therefore, Jesus is somehow now connected to the transatlantic slave trade. So by that same argumentation, if we had the good ship Aset, that would mean that Aset played a part in the transatlantic slave trade, right? That's how we're going, right? But people would fight that. Oh no, just because the name is ship, it doesn't mean right. But anyway, let's go into something else here. Right. Well, let's see what he says again. Christ, the first slave ship, the first ship that was used to bring Africans from the continent and transport them. Was it the first slave ship, Adam? Would you know?
I don't think it was actually, because I want to say it goes back to the Portuguese. I think that's what King Afonso was.
That would be interesting to figure out. Anyway, so
I don't think that's correct. But go ahead, yeah.
Across the American was known as the good ship Jesus. And as Alex Haley said when he did his research for Roots, he said that traditionally, remember that word, traditionally, when they were loaded on the slave ships, the captain in his log would see to it that the first two people loaded aboard those slave ships were a man and a woman, and they were recorded in the ship's log as Adam and Eve. Again, what does he want you to make the connection of? Right? Good ship Jesus.
Right.
The first two slaves in any ship were called Adam and Eve. Right? He wants to make this connection between the biblical narrative and the enslavement of black people. That's what he's trying to do. But what's interesting, right? Let's talk about research. Well, Alex Haley got this concept of these people being boarded and they're being called Adam and Eve. Comes from a book called The Slave Ship, A Human History by Marcus Rediker. This is where Alex Haley gets this idea. All right. Let me read the summary real quick. In The Slave Ship, award-winning historian Marcus Rediker draws on 30 years of research in maritime archives to create an unprecedented history of these vessels and the human drama acted out on their rolling decks. He reconstructs in chilling detail the lives, deaths, and terrors of captains, sailors, and the enslaved aboard a floating dungeon trailed by sharks. From the young African kidnapped from his village and sold into slavery by a neighboring tribe to the would-be priest who takes a job as a sailor on the slave ship only to be horrified at the evil he sees, to the captain who relishes having a hell of my own. Rediker illuminates the lives of people who were thought to have left no trace. So Adam, what I'm going to do, I'm going to read you a portion of this book. And what I want you to do for me and the people in the chat, when I read this, I want you to show me what literary genre is this passage being written in. Okay?
Sure. Gotcha.
All right, here we go. Here was a world unto itself, with tall, shaved, limbless trees, strange instruments, and a high-reaching system of ropes, pigs, goats, and fowl milled around the main deck. One of the white men had a local parrot, another a monkey. The Oba Coco was so big it even had its own Iba Wanta, small boat, on board. Another white man, filthy in his person, leered at her, made a lewd gesture, and tried to grope her. She lunged at the man, digging her fingernails into his face, bringing blood in several places before the disentangled himself from her and lashed her sharply 3 times with a small whip he was carrying. The black trader intervened and hustled her away. She recovered her composure. She surveyed the faces of the other prisoners on the main deck. All of them were young, some of them children. In her village, she was considered middling in age. But here, she was one of the oldest. She had been purchased only because the clever black trader had sold a large group in a lot, leaving the captain no choice but to take what he was offered, all or none. On the ship, she would be an elder. Many of the people on deck seemed to speak her language, Igbo, although many of them differently from herself. She recognized a couple of other groups of people from her home region, the simple Apas and the darker, more robust Otams. Many of the captives, she would learn later, have been on board the ship for months. The first 2 have been named Adam and Eve by the sailors. 3 or 4 sweeping the deck, many were washing up. Sailors handed out small wooden bowls for the afternoon meal. The ship's cook served beef and bread to some, the more familiar yams and palm oil to others. What genre is this being told? Can't hear you, Adam. You're muted.
Actually, I'm trying to cough at the same time, so you might have to skip me on this one, but
you're right.
I got something in my throat, bro. Like carry on.
Okay, no problem. So now he wanted to quote this as if this is some sort of scholarly historical like research. This is a novel. It's a novel.
All right, there we go. That's what I was actually going to say, because to me, from where I sit, there's just too much detail, like from her perspective, given the setting for it to have been like some sort of historical account. I seriously doubt that they would have been that interested in her perspective anyway, being an enslaved person.
It
sounds like a novel. Yeah,
it's a novel, but he's quoting it as an academic source.
Wow.
So he can't tell a historical, academic article from a novel. He doesn't know his genres.
Wow.
And he said traditionally, every ship, this ship in this story, these guys were called Adam and Eve. It wasn't tradition. It was in this story, in this ship that she was in this novel that showcases the many actual atrocities that did occur. But this right here is a novel representing that.
Yeah, and actually, I think he said too that it was the captains that named the people, but it sounds like it's just kind of generic here. It
right, it's just the first two who had been named, right,
by the sailors, so it's not specific to the captain. The other thing is too is it's important to note, from what I understand, and I meant to do a slide on this before. I understand, like, I think the good ship Jesus was actually referring to a Jesus of Lubeck. It's not Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus of Lubeck. With, if anything, it would have been named somebody might have been named Jesus or something like that, because culturally Christianity would have been in that culture at the time. But nevertheless, as I understand it, I mean, I guess there was some deception involved in getting these people on the ship or something like that, whatever. And ultimately what you have, let's just say, even if the Anthony Browder account is correct, ultimately what you have is a misrepresentation of Christianity. Yet again, this is what I talked about at the beginning, where you have to make a distinction between Christians, and Christianity. You know what I'm saying? You have to make that distinction. Unless you can demonstrate that whoever these enslavers, whatever they did, unless you can demonstrate that Christianity proper in its teaching is in line with what they did, or what they did was reflective of Christian teachings, then all you have is an ad hominem against Christianity, which is a fallacious form of argumentation. This is basically based on the bad behavior of people who profess to be Christians. And given that that's a fallacy, ad hominem, that's a fallacy, there's no good reason why we should take your argument seriously, or it should sway us in any way, shape, or form. So, once again, I mean, throughout this whole video, this whole clip, we've seen several different forms of fallacies presented. And what that tells us is, when we leave aside the emotion, we shouldn't be, taking these arguments seriously. Not for any thinking person anyway.
Right. So again, it's sad, because if you don't look and do the research, if you just take what he says, it sounds like he's quoting from some kind of academic source that did some research on a historical and actual slave ship.
Yeah.
Right. But what this person did was, he took things that were true, but to showcase these facts, he used a novel so that he could give you like imagine you being transported in the ship. What would you see? What would you smell?
Right.
Which is great, but it's not true.
Right.
It's a novel.
It's a novel, right?
Right. So anyway, let's continue.
Right. And Eve.
The African priests were always smarter than the European thief. Always remember that. The thief is never smarter than the one he or she is taking from. The one he or she is taking from is a superior being. That's why you're stealing. This is the whole point to why you're taking. Because what we got, you ain't got.
And in the case of King...
See, it's just real quick. And, again, great MC, but a really poor thinker, you know what I'm saying, with regard to this stuff here. I mean, when you think about what he just said, he said that the thief is never as smart as the person they're taking from. I mean, of course that's not true. I mean, there's all sorts of people, whether it be, what's that cat, Bernie Madoff, you know what I'm saying? Like, he was a pretty smart guy. Like, he deceived a lot of people, and got a whole lot of money out of it. I mean, like why think that it's true that somebody who's stealing from somebody else is never as smart as the person that they're stealing from? It could have been that the person who has what they're stealing maybe inherited it, you know what I'm saying, of no action or intelligence of their own. Maybe they got it by inheritance and somebody is thieving and stealing it. I mean, that just because you have something that somebody else wants doesn't mean that you are a higher being. It could have been gifted to you for some reason or whatever reason. Or what if you're a thief who stole a bunch of money? Let's say I'm a thief and I stole $1 million, right? And then you come along, you're a thief, and you steal $1 million from me. Am I a higher being than you because I have the $1 million? Because we're both thieves. You see what I'm saying? Like, so it sounds great, but ultimately here's why what he said would be compelling to somebody watching this video. Because again, it strikes at that heartstring, that chord of dignity, of Black dignity. You know what I'm saying? Even though you have these chieftains and so on and so forth being defrauded, it's not because they were duped or whatever. No, they were actually the more intelligent ones. You know what I'm saying? It's these other people, they were just thieving. It just really undergirds their dignity. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that those chieftains, whoever they may have been, had dignity because they're made in the image of God. And that's more than enough dignity for anybody. I mean, like we should all have that base layer of dignity that we regard in other people. And we don't have to fabricate things in order to conjure up a false, basis of identity. We just don't have to do that. But when you're so invested in conjuring up that dignity and you're doing it from a foundation that isn't sound, then you end up having to fabricate and misrepresent. So,
and one can also argue from the reverse. How many times have you heard a story of some thief or a group of thieves stole like this massive blue diamond or this rare portrait, which was secluded in this airtight fortress, and they were able to take it and they couldn't find out who or how they did it?
Yeah.
That person sounds very superior to me.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Hey, I don't want to spoil. I mean, spoiler alert, but I don't know if anybody checked out that Netflix show Lupin. You know what I'm saying, or Lupin, or however it's supposed to be pronounced. But it's about this guy. He's basically a high class, thief, stealing diamonds and all that kind of stuff. And then the main bad guy is, this really evil dude. You know what I'm saying that he ultimately is stealing some stuff from and dupes him. Clearly Lupin is the thief, but he's a better guy than the dude who's who's the main bad guy of the show. But it's just it's just silly, man. I mean, there's no reason to think that it's true that if you're the one that's stealing, the other person is a better person. They might have just stolen before you did. I mean, it's all kind of scenarios that make it so that's not necessarily true. All right, I know we're running back a little bit, and then we getting there, man. We almost there.
Yeah,
that's why you're stealing. This is the whole point to why you're taking, because what we got, you ain't got.
I mean, it's great rhetorical.
In the case of King,
it is
great rhetorical though.
Right.
I'm
James, I believe it was 1604 when he initiated 1604, 1609, when he commissioned a group of 50 men to pull together all of the references, all of the biblical references in existence. And one of the men who, it is said, participated in this project was the most prolific writer of the English language at that time, a young poet by the name of William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare did work on that project, but as with many religious works that were commissioned during that era, none of the authors were allowed to put their signatures on their works. So artists, being the creative people that they are, found creative ways of putting their signatures. In Psalms 46, verse 3, and Psalms 46, verse 9. The 46th word from the beginning of Psalms 46 is the word shake. The 46th word from the end of Psalms 46, 9 is the word spear, Shakespeare's name. Now, if you look at other versions of the Bible, not the King James Version, but other versions of the Bible, you won't find that same correlation. Only in the King James Version.
We are so far removed from the reality of our African spirit.
Yeah, that's wild, man.
Okay.
They're killing me, man. They're killing me.
Well, first of all, right, I need a primary source that shows me that the writers at that time were not allowed to put their own signature in their works.
Yeah, that's bizarre. Yeah, I don't know where you got that from. Yeah,
I need a source for that.
Right.
Two, the King James Project was a translation project.
Right.
They wasn't writing something new. They were just translating from the parchments that they have.
Well, yeah, and he also said something about that they brought together all the, I want to say how he framed it, the mentionings of Jesus or something like that, all the ones in existence, he said, which is, I think it's interesting because, I mean, the King James would have been drawn from like the Latin, like the Latin Vulgate. I mean, certainly there were not, I mean, by that point, aside from the Latin Vulgate, you would have had Coptic texts. You would have, shout out to, Vince Bantu, if I mispronounce this, but texts written in Ge'ez. I'm saying you would have.
Well, not at this point, not during the 1611 Bible. They had a very limited amount of parchments.
I'm saying that I know these weren't incorporated to the King James, but he said all mentions in existence. Well, they didn't have whoever translated the King James didn't have that. They weren't drawn from like the Coptic and these. I mean,
right, exactly, right.
You see what I'm saying? So they were, in other words, there were fragments in existence that were not drawn from in translating the King James. So when he says all in existence, he's reaching. That's a reach. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't all in existence. Now they drew from as many as they had.
Right.
That would have been true. You know what I'm saying? But to say all in existence, no, I mean, they weren't confirmed with the Coptics when they drafted that. You know what I mean?
So his claim, right, is these 46 words. You go from 46, you get shake. 46 words, you get spear, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So in order to get the perfect 46 out of Psalm 46, the word Selah must be omitted from the text. Since the word Selah seems to be used in many of the Psalms as a type of musical punctuations, then the proponents of the Shakespeare room would think that it would be acceptable not to count the word in order to obtain the desired result. However, the word is in the original text of the psalm. So you guys can't count either. You guys can't even count, bro.
It's not 46 words, though.
It's not 46.
Come on, man.
I mean, even if it was, it's such it's a reach. It's Reed Richards time again. You know what I mean?
And these are the OGs, bro. These are the OGs of the conscious community. Like for, I mean, I probably should have said it earlier. I don't know if I did or not, but when we're talking about the Hidden Colors, the docuseries in general, we're talking about the heavy hitters and OGs of the conscious community. Like these are the guys that, like your brother Polite, your Shaka Atmos, Garfield, so on and so forth. These would have been their predecessors and people who are highly esteemed in that community, whether it be a Professor Smalls, Anthony Browder. You can even say, even though he's younger, Umar Johnson,
right?
What's his name? Kaba or
Phil Valentine,
and Coleman. Other than what's his name? Tariq Nasheed and Umar Johnson. The rest of those guys, those older guys, those are all OGs. You know what I'm saying? So we're not going at some random dudes out here. You know what I mean? These are people who have been well respected in their community for a long time. Right. And they are making fundamentally like just elementary mistakes and errors that, I mean, I think is a discredit to the entire conscious community, quite frankly. If these are the guys that you're esteeming as your guy, that's your man.
These are the master teachers. These are the
master teachers. If the master teacher believes that the letter J wasn't created till 1600 and somehow that's problematic for Christianity, if your master teacher is saying that, you need a new master teacher. I'm saying, like, that's mind-bogglingly, elementarily wrong, fundamentally wrong. And so anyway, there's what it is.
Yeah, it's nuts.
You won't find that same correlation only in the King James Version.
We are so far removed from the reality of our African spirituality. And until we cast aside that white God, we can't be free.
That's it.
There we go.
So Adam, you gotta get rid of that white God, bro.
Yeah, hey man, gotta do it, man. Gotta do it. Hey, get rid of that dude. Once again, I'm all for getting rid of false representations of Christ, Christianity, so on and so forth. I'm all for that. But first of all, God is not white. There's no good reason to think Christianity. He's an incorporeal being. You know what I mean? There's no good reason to think that Christianity is a white man's religion. We've covered that in so many other videos. And I mean, at the end of the day, I will leave with this. For a thinking person, I mean, if you wanted to be led by emotions, then maybe this isn't for you. But for a thinking person, we have to differentiate between different types of value. Okay. The reality is, if let's say that you could go back historically and you can describe, from A to Z, all of every aspect of the spiritual framework that your ancestors held to, right? If you had a full description of what it was that they held to, that would answer the question, as to what they believed in practice. But it would not answer the question as to why we should affirm that what they believed in practice was true, right? It would just tell us what they believed in practice, but it wouldn't give us the extra step of why we should affirm and believe that what it is that they practice was true. You can have different types of value, but for me, I'm interested in truth value. If I'm going to put my life into a worldview or spiritual framework or ideology, whatever, I want to know that it's based upon truth, not just sentimentality. So let's say, for example, make it real quick. I've used this example before, I think, but let's say I had a family heirloom. Let's say you came to my crib to play Madden or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Well, I don't play Madden. I play 2K mostly. So let's say we play in 2K, and you get there and you look at this family heirloom. I got this big, big grandfather clock in the living room, and it says it's 12 p.m. Right? So we playing the game, whatever, you know what I mean? And we go like 3 or 4 games, and you're like, all right, man, I gotta head out. And you're like, yo, what time is it? I look over at the clock and say, oh yeah, it's 12 p.m. You're like, wait a minute, that can't possibly be right. It can't be 12. We just play like 4 or 5 games. They're like 30 minutes apiece. It can't be 12 o'clock still. And I'm like, oh yeah, man, that heirloom, it's been in the family for a long time. It doesn't work anymore, but we just keep it because it's valuable. If it's a family heirloom. Then you'd be like, yo, fam, like that's cool, but I need to know what time it is. So then you're gonna have to look at something else. You're gonna pull out your cell phone or whatever and find out what the time actually is. The point is, even though that family heirloom, that clock over there may have value to me, it may have sentimental value, it might be a family heirloom, it doesn't give me the time.
Right. It's not functional. It's
not functional. And so likewise, when it comes to African spirituality, whatever system you want to claim, Vodun, whatever it is you want to claim, the question is, you can't just stop at the point of sentimentality and say, well, okay, well, this is what our ancestors believed. I'm saying, and just subscribe to it because of that. I'm saying, because what I want to know is like, okay, cool, that's what they believe. That may be historically valuable for me to know that. Like, it's interesting to know. It might give me some insight about, my heritage, lineage, or whatever. But ultimately, I need a worldview that functions. That's right. Functional. I need a worldview that works. I need a worldview that's going to put me in contact with reality as it actually is. Right. Now, when it comes to Christianity, I've got a series of arguments to demonstrate that God exists, whether it be the Kalam, the contingency argument, so on and so forth. I got the argument for the resurrection, with somebody, I think Shadi Mills dropped in the chat earlier. People can check that out. That substantiates the central claim of Christianity, pointing us to the Christian God specifically. I've got various arguments and pieces of evidence that point to Christianity as a worldview being true. So regardless of what I feel about the sentimentality of some of these African spiritualities, and it might be of interest and so forth, I can study for those reasons. When it comes to how I'm going to live my life and what I'm going to subscribe to, I want to be in contact with truth, and I've got good reason to affirm that Christianity is true. And so when these dudes talk about like, oh, we got to get back to our African spirituality, and people saw this when I dialogue with Shaka Atmos and then also
Jabari.
Brother Jabari, I'm pressing you on, okay, cool. You say you subscribe to this. Why should anybody affirm that your worldview is true? I'm a thinking person. You can't just tell me, well, our ancestors believed it, and so I'm just gonna ride with it. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting what they believe, but I want to know. I need evidence or argumentation to demonstrate that what the ancestors believed, according to you anyway, that it's actually true. I've got evidence for Christianity, so you've got to give me something for your worldview if you're gonna sway me. I'm not just gonna be swayed by sentimentality.
But they're very disingenuous when it comes to the whole, we need to go back to what our ancestors held on to. Well, your ancestors, when they received the gospel, they put away Asa, Aset, and Heru.
Come on, man.
They burnt down the temple of Serapis. Because that's what Africans do, right? Yeah. Iconoclasm, right? They destroyed these previous temples because they no longer subscribe to those because they found something that best purports with reality. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But your ancestors did that. And it wasn't under, duress. In fact, right? The king of Zana got converted by 2 servants.
Yeah.
So he wasn't under duress. He heard some persuasive argumentation. They probably provided some great evidence. And he said, you know what? This is it. This is what I'm going to follow. I'm going to make Jesus Lord. So your ancestors did that freely. But those ancestors don't count, I guess. It's the ones before those guys, I guess, we should follow.
Right. They don't really respect the ancestors for real. They respect the ancestors that align with what they want to depict Africa as being about. That's what that is. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, when it comes to their African Christian ancestors, some of which were in West Africa prior to the transatlantic slave trade. Right. When it comes to them, you know what I'm saying? Oh, you got no time for them. You got to make them dumb, whitewashed, brainwashed. Oh, somehow they were duped into it or colonized or whatever. You got to do all that.
But you're pro-black.
But you're pro-black though.
Come on,
man.
Throwing your ancestors under the bus, but you're pro-black.
Right. If you want to, rebel against Christianity, do it on your own 2 feet. You don't have to subject our forefathers and foremothers to the disgrace of having you just, judge them for their beliefs or whatever. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to subject them to that just to rebel against Christianity. If you don't want to rock with it, don't rock with it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Leave it at that. But hey, man, you know what it is, bro.
Definitely. But listen, man, I think we did our thing. And we went old school. It's about to be 3 hours in.
we hit him with that old school, bro.
But we had to, man. I mean, this is such a pivotal, piece of content that really caused a lot of people to stumble in their Christian walk.
Yeah, facts, right.
And I just wish there was there was urban apologetics, but I wish we was there earlier so that we could deal with this, sooner.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, man. I think that ultimately things have changed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, not only has, unfortunately this bad information has got out, but it prompted people like us to, get off the couch and, really make a difference, man, and begin to address videos like these and other stuff. And I think that our community, UA community, Urban Apologetics community continues to grow. And I think that it's such that if stuff like this comes out in the future, it won't go unchallenged. You know what I'm saying? Right. That being said, it just so happens that there actually is a documentary that's coming out. There's going to be a counterpoint to Hidden Colors that I was blessed to be a part of. It's coming out through Jude 3 called Unspoken. And that's featuring a lot of folks, man.
Breaking news.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be in there. Damon Richardson, Eric Mason, actually the author of this book that I held up earlier, David Wilhite. He's going to be in there. Man, it's a whole slew of people that's going to be in it. I know. Bantu's going to be in it, and a bunch of others. But it's we're really shedding light on all the aspects of the Hidden Colors that Hidden Colors didn't shed light on. So that's what we're going to be doing with that, man, and bringing real scholarship stuff that you can actually research, point by point, and find actual primary sources and evidence to back it up. You know what I mean? Right. So that's coming out, man.
No, that's amazing. I mean, the fact that we have literature now, we're going to have documentaries. This is what's up, man. This is what's up.
It's a whole new ball game, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got shout out to Jerome Gay, Whitewashing of Christianity, Urban Apologetics, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel, edited by Eric Mason. I contributed a chapter in that. We got, I just had it here a second ago, Bantu. He's got a couple books, but I got this one right here. A Multitude for All Peoples. Bantu. Like, these are all people that matriculate in our community, man, of the Urban Apologetics community. It's a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of it, bro.
Right. And the reason why we did this video is so that we can have something on record. Because this is tedious, doing the research and finding things. Yeah. It is tedious, and we did that so that we can have something on the public record so that when someone comes to you with these talking points, give them this video. Yeah, I mean it's a long video, but give them this video.
Yeah. I mean, but it's long, but it's a lot of good information, man. You know what I'm saying? Like I think we gave people detail, references, and you know what? I just want to say too. I mean, for those who might be watching who aren't Christians, you know what I'm saying? Like I heard somebody say the other day on one of these channels that I just put it this way: like we doing real scholarship over here. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't have to check your brain at the door to be a Christian. You know what I'm saying? You can engage in real history. Listen, I mean, through this, we've done 3 hours of content, right? And if you notice, I mean, we may have referenced the scripture here and there. I don't know if we did or not, quite frankly. I know we referenced Psalms because Browder brought it up. But we're not just responding because the Bible told me so. Now, there's nothing wrong, I'm saying, with refuting untruths of scripture. I'm not in the slightest. I applaud people who do, and we ought to whenever we have occasion. But nevertheless, we've given you historical and philosophical argumentation.
Right.
3 hours.
Question here. Did you guys speak on the museum and whether or not Christians should support it? What museum? I don't know what museum you guys are talking about. Do you know what he means by that? Of any specific museum?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, bro. You're gonna have to
the museum. I'm not sure.
I don't know. But again, we did this so that you guys can have a resource so that when because your timeline, so they still gonna have this, right? Yeah. If not a clip of the documentary, it's gonna be a meme based on this segment of this documentary. Now you have a video to refute that.
Right. It's like Byron Washington.
There's a Hidden Colors Museum? I didn't know that.
Oh, he just started a campaign for Hidden Colors Museum. I'll be honest with you. Like, listen, now whether or not Christians should support it, no, I don't think Christians should, and I'll tell you why. I am all for bigging up, building museums for schools for Africans and African history, whatever. I've been to the one in Washington D.C. It's a great museum. You know what I'm saying? It's dope. But when it comes to Hidden Colors specifically, on two levels, I think that we have good reason not to support it. Number one, clearly they have an anti-Christian agenda. They're clearly trying to leverage African heritage against Christianity. And I think Christianity is true. I think that we have good reason to affirm that it's true. And, ultimately, I think it's a gospel issue. So we ought not to support things that are intent on opposing the gospel. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, I mean, now this is just, regardless of what your belief system is, I feel like anybody should get behind this. I don't think that we have the room for error, when it comes to the Black community, when it comes to the ideas that we're exposed to. Like, we really don't have a lot of room for error. We can't tolerate having just erroneous, fallacious information being fed to our community. I really believe that. I say it all the time. It's a broken record. You can't build a strong community on a foundation of weak ideas. I don't think that we should support any institution that will be propagating false information in our community, regardless of who it is or what it doesn't matter. We shouldn't support people like that. And so on those two grounds, and you're dealing with falsehoods and falsehoods that are being leveraged against Christianity. No, I don't think that Christians, who should be people of truth, we should not be supporting somebody who's intentionally funneling falsehood, particularly when it's leveraged against Christianity.
No, absolutely. If this museum is a brick and mortar version of the clip that we just refuted, I'm not stepping foot in there. For what? To be lied to? I'm good.
Do that, right? For what?
I could get lied to for free in the streets of Brooklyn. I don't need to pay admission to be lied to. I'm good.
Yeah. right.
I'm good.
We just can't afford it as a community. I mean,
Wow, Byron says that he almost got 500,000.
I'm sure. I'm sure that's true. I mean, this series has done very well. People support it every time he releases a new iteration of it. I'm sure it did, and I think it's unfortunate because it's a testament to how underinformed our community is. I think that's really unfortunate. Right. I would like to see a Black community that is so well-grounded educationally that when people like Tariq Nasheed and the individuals in this video that we just reviewed, when they begin to push pseudo information, it's like there's no room for it to land in our community. That's what I would like to see. I would like to see us as such a place educationally and in terms of critical thinking that there's no room for Hidden Colors, not because of its aim of supposed aim of promoting Black dignity. That's fine, but just based on the misinformation. I would love to see it to where there's no room for this degree of misinformation in our community.
I mean, unfortunately, even though we're making great strides as a community, it's still David versus Goliath on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
And that's why the people in the chat, I mean, you guys, it's 3 hours and you're still rocking with us. Like, that's amazing. And we really, really appreciate that. And we need you guys. We need you guys to spread the word. Those of us who are content creators within the UA, we desperately need you guys to support us. And I don't even mean financially. Hit the like button. Recommend the video. Post the link on your page, on your Instagram, on your Twitter. When you're having lunch and they bring up some of this stuff, it's like, hey, Adam, this is a guy named Adam Coleman. He has a great channel. You need to look at this.
I'll be honest. This is a confession on my end. Like, I think sometimes, because I study this stuff all the time, things that are common to me, and I'm not trying to say I'm like a genius or something like that, but
yes,
things that
yes, you are.
No, I'm definitely not saying that.
I know.
I'm going somewhere with this, so stay with me. But like, I think things that are just common sense to me and just common knowledge to me, I forget sometimes that there's thousands and millions of people who are unaware of it. Like when we talk about African Christianity, so on and so forth.
Right,
and
right.
I think that same effect is present in the UA community. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, but just really something that we need to be aware of. Stuff that's common to us and stuff that we talk about all the time. There's evidence for Christianity, so forth. Like we can, in other words, we can take for granted the knowledge that we have. And so in taking it for granted, we can then become complacent to not share it with others. I'm saying we need to be sharing this stuff with others with the awareness that there's literally millions of people, multiple millions of people who are unaware of the kinds of things that we talk about all the time, and they need it, right? I mean, I can show you channels right now of people who are just talking straight nonsense and have millions of subscribers. I'm not hating. I'm just saying that there's millions of people being deceived, and we need to be about the business of getting this information out as much as possible so that we can shed light on the truth, and God can work through that as a means to draw people to Himself.
Absolutely. And with that being said, Adam, what can we expect from you in the immediate future?
Yeah, man, I'm actually going to be on Alex McElroy's channel next week, talk about the contingency argument, which is one of the arguments that I covered in the Urban Apologetics book, in my chapter on it, rather. So we're going to be doing that, and just getting back to doing what I do, man. Got more podcasts coming out. I'll be doing more short videos where I'm just kind of breaking down stuff like what we did, now, but just kind of more in bite-sized pieces. And yeah, man, just got some interviews that I'm lining up. Be praying for me. I got some speaking engagements as well, so be praying for me on that, man. So yeah.
That's what's up. As for me, we will be having the bodega tomorrow, so be there at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or EDT as they say it now. So this is great, man. It's long overdue.
Yeah, man.
I'm so happy I was able to do it with Mr. Coleman. And thank you for just holding us down for these 3 hours. You guys are amazing. And again, please press the like button, share the content so that people's faith do not have to be shaken.
Amen.
So that people can have the same epiphany that Adam had when he first saw this clip. It's like, my faith doesn't need to be shaken because this is nonsense, right? We want everyone to have that same epiphany,
right?
You know what I mean? So, any last words before we out of here, Mr. Coleman?
No, I can't say any better than that, man. I love you guys. What I say all the time: love God, love people, take care of the things that God blesses you with, man.
That's what's up. So with that, Adam Coleman, BK signing off. Peace.